Hi there, and welcome to A Song of Ice and Fire Explained. Today we'll be summarising the entirety of A Feast for Crows in preparation for the release of The Winds of Winter. We'll also point out some of the cool theories and conspiracies going on. Now, if you've only watched the TV series and not read the books, you might not know that the events in this book take place in King's Landing, Dawn, and the Iron Islands, while simultaneously the events in A Dance with Dragons take place in Essos and the North. So, let's begin with the prologue chapter of A Feast for Crows. Pate sits with his fellow students Merlander, Aleris, Armin, and Rune at the Quill and Tankard in Old Town. He yearns for Rosie, the pretty daughter of a serving maid, a 15-year-old girl, whose maidenhead can only be had for a gold coin. The other students discuss dragons, and whether they are still any in existence. Pate is waiting for an alchemist who promised to meet him there that evening. The alchemist has offered to change iron into gold, requesting that Pate steal a particular iron item in exchange for some gold, and said he would be back in 3 days to make the exchange. Merlander and Armin continue their argument about dragons. Merlander says that sailors' tales speak of dragons in Essos, often accompanied by a young queen. Aleris keeps splitting thrown apples with his arrows. After the last, he brings up the Targaryens, telling the others that Viserys Targaryen's sister, Daenerys, is still alive. Merlander drunkenly toasts her, only to be shushed by Armin. Lazy Leo appears then. Merlander bristles at his appearance. Armin asking more diplomatically whether Leo wasn't confined to the Citadel for 3 more days, but Leo shrugs this off with a quip on the meaningless of time. He asks them to buy him a drink, since he lost his money gambling and eating elsewhere. He offends them each in turn, then attempts to mollify them by confirming that Daenerys is alive and has hatched 3 dragons, as the tales come out of Quarth. Archmaester Marwyn even gives them credence. Leo says, Marwyn, called the Mage, is widely considered unsound, partly because of his practice of speaking to small folk and other unwholesome people. After the others scoff, Leo adds that there is a dragonglass candle burning in Marwyn's chambers. The group breaks up after that, most of the students returning to the Citadel. Pate remains with Leo, hoping that the alchemist will still come by. Leo needles Pate a few times about Rosie. Pate wishes he could kill Leo, but Leo is a Tyrell, with relatives in positions of power. He sees the sun rising and realizes that the night is over and the alchemist has not come. He leaves with a warning to Leo to leave Rosie alone, and wanders through Old Town in the early morning. The alchemist finds him and tells Pate that he didn't want to intrude on him and his friends. He has asked Pate to steal something from Archmaester Walgrave. Pate opened the box under Walgrave's bed and found an Archmaester's iron key, which supposedly opens every lock in the Citadel. After wrestling with his conscience, he took it, as well as a sack of silver coins. He asks the alchemist for his gold dragon coin, and the alchemist bids him to follow him someplace more private. They go through several winding streets and end up in an alley. The alchemist gives Pate the coin, but the boy hesitates before offering up the key. He asks the alchemist's intentions, which he will not say, and asks to see his face, which is nondescript, but book readers suspect he is Jaqen H'ghar. After giving the key to the alchemist, he turns away, feeling lightheaded, and collapses, dead on the cobblestones a few moments later. Chapter 1 has Aeron Greyjoy, who in the chapter is referred to as the Prophet, drowning men at a beach on Great Wick. This is a practice in which a worshipper of the drowned god is held below the water until he drowns. The priest then resuscitates him using CPR. Through this initiation, the person is stronger. What is dead may never die, but rises again, harder and stronger. Gorman Goodbrother appears to bring Aeron to Lord Gorald Goodbrother. Aeron initially declines, but relents when the messenger tells him the king, Aeron's brother, is dead. During the journey, Aeron remembers his brothers. His father married 3 times. The sons of his first wife died young. The eldest son from his second marriage was the strongest and fiercest of the remaining. Aeron admired Balon, although they were not close in their youth. When they arrive at Lord Goodbrother's hall at Hammerhorn, Aeron demands that everyone in the hall be sent away so that he and Gorald Goodbrother can speak privately. Lord Goodbrother insists that his maester will stay as well. Aeron disagrees and prepares to leave, but the maester stops him by informing him that Euron Greyjoy has occupied the sea stone chair. Aeron is shocked. He remembers his brother, but with little love. Goodbrother wants advice on whom to support, but Aeron wants to pray first and leaves for Pebbleton. Again, Aeron thinks back to his youth. He was not a very religious man, but rather a drunken sod. This changed when he fell overboard in a sea battle during Balon's rebellion. He almost drowned and became a devoted follower of the drowned god. Aeron has discussed the succession with Balon, though Balon wanted his daughter, Asha, to succeed him. Aeron did not agree with having a woman rule the Iron Islands. Theon is a weakling and probably dead. Balon's eldest brother, Euron, is ungodly and Aeron hates him. Thus, Aeron makes up his mind. It must be Victorian. A few days later, Aeron has arrived at Pebbleton and starts to preach. Asha has also claimed the throne. Now, Aeron's followers and a number of lords look to him for advice on whom to support. During his preaching, he finds his inspiration. The Iron Men should elect the king in a king's moot, as they did in the old days. Every captain is to go to Nagga's Hill on Oldwick, the ancient place where the old kings were chosen. Aeron hears his followers take up his call and knows he has done the right thing. Chapter 2. Prince Doran has been living at the Water Gardens for nearly 2 years now, watching the children play in the pools while trying to deal with his gout. Captain Erio Hotar hears the approach of Obara Sand, eldest of the Red Viper's bastard daughters, and bars her from disturbing Prince Doran's rest. Deadly as she may be, she is no match for the captain, but the prince calls her into his presence before they come to blows. Obara demands justice for her father, imploring Prince Doran to marshal the Dornish army and give half to her so she might march on Old Town and burn it to the ground, and the other half to her half-sister, Lady Nym, to march up the King's Road. Doran tells her that his brother was not murdered, but died in single combat, and that Lord Tywin has promised them Sir Gregor's head. Unappeased, Obara mocks her uncle for his weakness, and stalks off after he tells her to await his word in Sunspear. Fearing an uprising in Sunspear, incited by the Sand Snakes, Prince Doran tells Hotar that he must return to his seat at the Palace of the Sun. The captain reminds him that Princess Marcella is there, and that Sir Eris Oakheart sends letter to Queen Cersei. Hotar thinks that he and the King's Guard will eventually cross swords, and when that occurs, the captain will kill him. The next morning, the prince and his retinue begin the journey back to Sunspear, but along the way, they come upon another of the Sand Snakes. The beautiful Lady Nym is far more tactful than her older half-sister, but no less resolved to seek justice for her father. Scoffing at Obara's demand to go to war, Lady Nym tells her uncle that she needs only her sister, Tyene, and the two will assassinate Cersei, Jaime, Tywin, and King Tommen, stating that his brother was only to take the measure of Joffrey's court and not seek revenge for Elia, despite the 17 years that have passed. Nymeria responds in parting, "My sisters and I shall not wait 10 and 7 years for our vengeance." Arriving in Sunspear, the prince's retinue is accosted by townspeople, calling for vengeance for the Red Viper. In the old palace, Princess Arianna greets her father and tells him that Tyene Sand awaits him in the throne room. The third of the Sand Snakes is embroidering when the captain encounters her while bearing Prince Doran to his high seat. Tyene offers her uncle the cloth she is knitting, which shows her father mounted on a sand steed, so that he will not forget Oberyn. Prince Doran responds, "I am not like to forget your father." That is good to know. Many have wondered. Tyene counsels her uncle to wed his son Tristan to Marcella now, and then crown the princess as is the Dornish way. This would incite the Queen Regent and High Garden to march on Dorne, where the prince's armies could bleed them in the high passes and treacherous deserts. When she calls her uncle fearful, Doran advises her, there is a difference between fear and caution. Tyene raises her hand to touch her uncle, but Hotar brings the butt of his long axe down on the marble floor and cautions her. The Sand Snake replies that she meant no harm and loves her uncle. After she takes her leave, Maester Caliot rushes to the prince's side to make sure he was not pricked by one of Tyene's needles. Shortly after, Prince Doran commands Hotar to round up and confine all the Sand Snakes, including Alara's 4 young daughters. Obara, Nymeria, and Tyene are locked up in cells atop the Spear Tower, but with no blood spilt. The younger Sand Snakes are restricted together with their mother to the Water Gardens. When Hotar tells him that the common folk will howl when they find out, the Prince of Dawn replies, "All Dawn will howl. I only pray Lord Tywin hears them." so he might know what a loyal friend he has in Sunspear. Chapter 3. Cersei dreams that she rules from the Iron Throne, and courtiers are playing her tribute. But the pleasant dream turns into a nightmare when Tyrion appears and ridicules her, making the great lords, proud ladies, and young knights snigger at her as well. She notices she is naked and hastily tries to cover up, but this makes her wound herself on the spikes and blades of the Iron Throne, and soon she is engulfed in a mortal combat with the throne that is trying to rip the flesh off her. She is woken up by her frightened maid, Senelle, with armed men who have arrived to deliver the news of Lord Tywin's murder. Cersei is still drowsy and believes this to be part of her nightmare, and expects Tyrion to crawl from under her bed to laugh at her. She now recognizes Jocelyn Swift, Sir Osmond Kettleback, and Sir Boris Blount, and notices Lannister guards. She wonders whether the news can be true, insisting that her father is surrounded by guards, day and night. Sir Osmond tells her the guards were on their posts, but a secret passage has been found behind a hearth in the Hand's Tower, and Jaime has gone in to inspect it. Cersei is worried about Jaime's safety as well as of Tommen's, but she is told that guards supervised by Sir Loras Tyrell have been assigned to watch over the king. This stirs up her resentment against the Tyrells, and she wonders whether the murder was their doing, yet does not dare to speak this aloud. She commands Sir Osmond to escort her to the Tower of the Hand, and Sir Boris to make certain that Tyrion is still in his cell. She doesn't believe Tyrion would dare raise a hand against their father, but needs to be certain. Outside, the sun is beginning to rise, while the stars can still be seen, making Cersei think that the great star of the west has fallen. Sir Osmond tells her that Lum, one of the guards, found the body in the privy. She already feels the hole left by Lord Tywin, and decides to act swiftly as she suspects there will be attempts to push her aside, as always. She wonders whether Stannis Baratheon is behind the murder. She enters the tower and thinks that not crying makes her the only true son her father ever had. Climbing the many stairs to the Hand's chambers prompts her to think about tearing the tower down. As she enters the hall, she finds the room full of guards and servants, whispering among themselves. Cersei resents their presence and the fact that she was not called first. She orders Sir Mirren Trant to show the people out and is informed that her father's body has been brought to his bed. When she enters the bedchamber, guards are present again, as well as her distraught Uncle Kevin, kneeling by the bed and trying to pray for his brother. She notices how small the door to the secret passage behind the hearth is, making her think of Tyrion again, then settling for Stannis or the Tyrells as more likely suspects. She knows about the rumours of secret passages in the Red Keep, and that Maegor the Cruel supposedly killed the builders of the castle to keep them secret. She thinks of other yet undiscovered secret passages to other bedchambers, and has a vision of Tyrion using one to get to Tommen. Cersei has a look at her father's half-naked body. While reflecting on how he looks much older and smaller than when he was alive, she already notices a smell emanating from the corpse. She is furious that the quarrel that killed Lord Tywin has been left in his stomach and orders it to be removed. Cersei wonders whether she should act desperate and claw her own face, as she heard Catelyn Stark did when her son Robb was killed before her eyes, and wonders how Lord Tywin once received news of his own father's death. She commands that the bells must toll for her father, just as they did for King Robert. She asks for Pycelle and wants him to prepare the body, but is told Grand Maester has already been there and left again. This angers her more because of Pycelle's uselessness in old age, and she calls for Maesters Balabar and Franken instead. Cersei asks about Jaime and is again told he's down in the secret passage, inspecting the depth of a shaft found there. She is worried about his safety, thinking of his lost hand and how the murderer might await him in the dark. Qyburn is shown in, offering his service as Maester. He informs her that he treated Jaime's hand, and she remembers that he came down from Harrenhal with her brother. She notices that he doesn't have a Maester's chain, receiving the answer that it has been taken away by the Citadel while his knowledge is still there. She orders him to remove the quarrel and prepare her father's body for the Silent Sisters. Qyburn asks her what he should do with the girl. Cersei has not noticed the second body in the bed before, and takes a look at her naked body, observing the golden chain around her neck, and that her face is as black as Joffrey's was when he died. She demands to know what the girl is doing here, receiving the unsatisfying answer that she has been found where she is, and that she's Tyrion's whore. She thinks that Lord Tywin never used whores, and defensively tells a guard how Tywin treated his own father's mistress after his death, parading her naked through the streets of Lannisport. Qyburn suggests that Lord Tywin might have been questioning the girl. Cersei eagerly seizes on this notion, but has a vision of Tyrion mocking it. And what better way to question her than naked? She can't stand staying in the room any longer, and goes back to the hall. Cersei finds Sir Osmond accompanied by his brothers Osney and Osford, and orders them to make certain that nobody will ever hear about the dead girl in her father's bed. Her body is disposed of by the Kettlebacks, and Cersei remembers the girl's name and that she came to her the night before Tyrion's trial by combat, asking that promises made to her by Tyrion and allegedly Cersei be kept, including a manse in the city and a night to marry. Cersei made it clear that she would get nothing until she told them the whereabouts of Sansa Stark, making her leave in tears. She orders the Kettlebacks to carry Shay's body through the secret passage, but wants to have the chain around her neck delivered to herself. As Sir Osford is about to step into the tunnel, Jaime emerges from it. She rushes towards him, asking whether he has found the killers, but is told that the shaft ends in a chamber where half a dozen tunnels meet, some of them closed with locked iron gates, and Jaime needs to find keys first. He suggests that the killers could still be hiding in the maze he just left. Cersei again envisions Tyrion climbing through the walls like some monstrous rat. She says she wants the murderers found and the whole tower to be demolished if need be. Jaime hugs her to console her, and she has a rush of desire for him. She whispers in his ear, asking him to take over as Hand of the King, to complete their father's work, but he pushes her away, declines the offer, makes a joke about a hand without a hand, and says that she shouldn't ask him to rule. Cersei feels the rejection like a slap, realizing that it has been noticed by everyone present, and that the whole castle will know soon. She angrily says that she didn't ask him to rule, as she is going to do that herself as the Queen Regent until Tommen comes of age. Jaime replies that he doesn't know whom to feel worse for, Tommen or the Seven Kingdoms. She slaps him. They are both admonished by Sir Kevan to take their indecent behaviour out of the room where their father's body lies. Jaime apologises for his sister, pointing out that she is forgetting herself while grief-stricken. This makes Cersei want to slap him again, and regret her impulse to ask him. She wonders whether to abolish the position of Hand altogether, remembering how Jon Arryn and Eddard Stark meddled in her affairs, the latter forcing her to get rid of King Robert before she could deal with his brothers, and how Tyrion sold Marcilla to Dorne, made Tommen a hostage, and killed Joffrey. Cersei settles on her uncle Kevan as the next Hand, as she considers him loyal and prudent, while unambitious to challenge her as the real power behind the Iron Throne. She thinks that she needs men supporting her, and that the current small council will not do, with Grand Maester Pycelle too old, and Lord Mace Tyrell and his bannermen, Lord Paxter Redwyn and Lord Mathis Rowan, not to be trusted. She also can't rely on Jaime, who has lost his courage with his hand. She again considers the possibility the Tyrells were involved in the murder, as Lord Mace must have known he can never rule the Seven Kingdoms as long as Tywin Lannister is alive. However, she realizes she has to proceed carefully against the Tyrells, with the city full of their men and Loras Tyrell now a knight of the Kingsguard. The thought of the engagement of Tommen and Margaery Tyrell still makes her furious, and she questions Margaery's virginity. Cersei intends to use Varys to find out more on this front. The thought of Varys makes Cersei aware that the eunuch isn't present, while he is usually around when something important happens in the Red Keep. The only explanation for his absence is that he was involved in the plot, preempting his own downfall, as Lord Tywin never had any love for him. She thinks that Varys might have known about the secret passage and acted on behalf of Stannis. She orders Sir Meryn to find the Master of Whisperers and bring him to her. Sir Boros returns red-faced and puffing, announcing that Tyrion is gone, his cell open with no sign of him anywhere. Cersei is appalled, thinking her nightmares are coming true. She points out her orders to keep the imp under guard day and night. Sir Boros says that a jailer called Rugen has gone missing while 2 others were found asleep. She orders for them to be killed. Cersei's paranoia of Tyrion breaks out fully and reflects that he has already killed her mother, her father, and her eldest son, and will try to murder her too. Remembering the prophecy she once received about her little brother killing her, She gets queasy, and so Boris tries to sustain her, but she recoils from his touch, thinking he might be one of Tyrion's creatures. She envisions Tyrion grinning at her, feeling his hands closing in around her neck the very moment she thought she was rid of him. Chapter 4. Brienne travels to Duskendale, seeking the whereabouts of Sansa as she was charged to do by Jaime. Having found few leads in King's Landing, Brienne asks nearly everyone she can along the roads and villages, but never mentions Sansa by name. Upon the road beyond Rosby, she comes upon a camp with Illifur the Penniless and Creighton Longbow, two hedge knights who offer to share their meal, mistaking her for a man at first. Sir Illifur later remarks on how Brienne bears a shield with the sigil of House Lothston, a disgraced family who once held Harrenhal. Brienne was given the shield by Sir Jaime, who had taken it from Harrenhal. When she tells the two that she lost her own shield, Illifur figures out by her size that she must be Brienne, murderess of King Renly. The Maid of Tarth denies having killed Renly, and the hedge knights agree to travel with her to Duskendale. After passing a large group of poor fellows, or sparrows, lowly holy men bound for King's Landing, bearing the bones of septons killed around the Riverlands, they catch up to a merchant guarded by a couple of men and another hedge knight named Sir Shadrick. Joining forces along the dangerous road, Shadrick tells Brienne in private that he knows that the maid she seeks is Sansa Stark, and that he seeks her as well, but for a purse of gold offered by Varys. Brienne is disturbed by the fact that the knight knew whom she was speaking of when describing Sansa's description to the merchants group. When the party stops at an inn, the Old Stone Bridge, for the night, Brienne slips off on her own, swearing to herself that she will not fail Jaime, having already failed King Renly and Lady Catelyn. Chapter 5. Down in the library beneath Castle Black, Sam is trying to find any information on the others for his Lord Commander, Jon Snow. Returning to the surface, Sam considers how hard Jon has been working the men of the Watch. He meets Dolores Ed, Pip, and Gren, and they mention how much Jon has changed, acting differently and barely spending any time with his friends, although he never misses a day practicing his sword work. We learn that Stannis has plans for Val, Dalla's sister, seeking to use her to forge an alliance between the Wildlings and the Northmen. Thus far, only the Karstarks, who have no other choice, have agreed to ally with Stannis. Sam arrives at Jon's Solar, and Jon shows him a letter he plans to send to King Tommen, which declares that Stannis is aiding them in their battle, but the Night's Watch is not sworn to his cause. They discuss how Melisandre means to sacrifice Mance Rayder for his king's blood. Jon states, "Mance's blood is no more royal than mine own." He reveals to Sam that he is sending Gilly and the boy far away from the wall. Sam tells Jon that he has uncovered little on the others, but one book mentioned Dragonsteel swords as being effective against them. However, neither is sure if Dragonsteel and Valyrian steel are the same thing. Jon breaks the news that he is sending Sam to the Citadel so he can become a Maester and replace Aemon. Sam will travel by sea from Eastwatch, along with Gilly, the baby, and Maester Aemon. The thought of becoming a Maester frightens Sam, bringing back memories of his father's wrath when he had mentioned training at the Citadel to him when he was a boy. His father had chained him by the neck in a cell and left him there for 3 days, telling him, "No son of House Tarly will ever wear a chain." Lastly, Jon commands Sam to never call himself Craven again. The next morning, as the party prepares to set off for Eastwatch, where they will join up with Darien, Gilly begs Jon to find a good wet nurse for the other baby. Chapter 6. Nearing Braavos by ship, Arya recalls how she originally wanted Captain Tornesio Terrace to sail for the Wall. She had no such luck, but concluded the Free Cities would be a good place to land, considering that Syrio Forel came from Braavos, and possibly Jaqen H'ghar as well. During the voyage, many of the sailors, and even the captain, have tried to get her to learn and remember their names, and many seem afraid of her. The captain's youngest son, Denyo, is telling Arya some of the history of Braavos and the Titan that guards its port. The Free City honors all gods and even has temples devoted to them, and was founded by the Moonsingers when they brought the people to Braavos to escape the dragons of Valyria. The Titan of Braavos is a massive statue and has arrow slits and murder holes strategically placed to attack any boat that tries to pass beneath without leave. Furthermore, the Free City of Braavos is protected by the Arsenal, a massive fleet of ships and their fortified port. The captain has his oldest son, Yorko, row Arya to shore, so as to get her off prior to customs coming aboard. As Yorko navigates the 100 Isles of Bravos, he points out many of the sights, before dropping her off at the quay in front of the House of Black and White. Arya disembarks, assuring Yorko that she will remember his name, and enters the temple of the many-faced god. Within, the temple is quite dark with dozens of odd statues. Arya notices several people in alcoves who are either dead or dying. Soon, a robed man with a kind voice tells her that the House of Black and White is a place of peace. He asks her name, but despite Arya's use of nicknames, the man keeps asking until she admits that she is Arya Stark. When the man asks if she fears death, Arya answers no. The man removes his cowl to reveal a decaying, horrible visage, but she sees through the illusion. Impressed, the kindly man asks if she's hungry, and Arya thinks, yes, but not for food. Chapter 7. Cersei arrives at the Great Sept of Baelor for Tywin's wake, and is worried since Tommen seems to have a cold and the current High Septon was appointed by Tyrion. She wonders if she should have him removed. Tommen and Cersei both notice the stench that is emanating from her father's corpse. After the service, the procession of mourners come to offer condolences to Cersei. First is Felice Stokeworth, who mentions that her sister is ready to give birth and the family would like to name the child Tywin. Cersei is offended and brusquely forbids her. Next is Lancel, who is still looking half dead, professes his newfound faith. Cersei heads him off by saying, "Atonement is best achieved through prayer, silent prayer." The only mourner to please Cersei is Tanya Merryweather, who promises that all her friends in the Free Cities have been notified to watch for and seize Tyrion. When Mace Tyrell comes before her, he mentions that his uncle Garth is on the way to assume the duties of Master of Coin. Cersei, not wishing to see another Tyrell on the small council, immediately backpedals that Guilus Rosby has already accepted the post. This upsets Tyrell and his mother, as Tywin had wanted Garth to assume the position. The Queen of Thorns then brings up the terrible smell in the Sept, and Cersei wants nothing more than to get rid of the clever old woman. But Lady Olenna states she will not depart until Margaery is wed to Tommen. Leaving the Sept, Cersei rides back to the Red Keep with Guilus Rosby, asking him belatedly to be her new Master of Coin, which he accepts. Back in her rooms, Qyburn pays her a visit, revealing that he discovered in the under-jailer's sleeping cell a gold coin that dated back to the Gardener Kings of the Reach. Cersei again suspects the Tyrells had a hand in Tyrion's escape and Tywin's murder. Qyburn then asks if he may experiment on the dying Cregor Clegane in the Black Cells, since he is more adept at the nature of death than any of the maesters from the Citadel. Cersei agrees with his request, but tells him to bring her Cregor's head when he dies, as her father had promised it to Dorne. Finally, Kevan meets with her for dinner, as she had requested. Cersei asked him to be Tommen's hand. Kevan first admonishes her for making Mace Tyrell look a fool in front of half the court. He then informed her that he would rather help his son, Lancel, take control of Castle Darry. He offers to take up the position as hand, provided Cersei removes herself from King's Landing and returns to Castle Rock. Cersei is infuriated, and a fierce argument takes place during which she threatens Kevan. Unfazed, Kevan counters her to name Randall Tarley or Mathis Rowan as Tommen's hand. As both men are Tyrell vassals, she could drive a wedge between them and Highgarden. But the suggestion makes her even more angry, and she accuses him of abandoning Tommen. As he departs, Kevan reveals that he knows who Tommen's father really is. Chapter 8. Standing a planned 7-day vigil over his father's funeral bier, Jaime finds himself with a lot of time for thinking. He feels that he is as much to blame for his father's death as Tyrion or Varys. He also finds himself wondering what happened to the eunuch. His thoughts then turn to the day that Prince Rhaegar rode for the Trident. Jaime had begged not to be left behind to guard the king, but Rhaegar told him that Aerys feared Lord Tywin more than he did Robert, and he meant to keep Jaime at his side as insurance. Mounting up, Rhaegar's last words to Jaime were, "When this battle's done, I mean to call a council. Changes will be made. I meant to do it long ago. But, well, it does no good to speak of roads." not taken. Finally, Jaime recalls his recent questioning of the chief underjailer, which was a complete farce as Jaime knew far more than the man did, since he helped facilitate Tyrion's escape. When Jaime learned that the two jailers who were put to sleep were killed by Boris Blunt and Osmond Kettleblack, he reprimanded them, warning them never to act on his sister's orders to kill anyone without consulting him first. Sometime in the middle of the night, Cersei visits him with the news of Kevan's refusal to becoming her hand, as well as remarking that Kevan knows about their relationship. She implores Jaime to reconsider being hand, but Jaime rejects her again. She departs with, "Very well, if it is a battlefield you want, battlefields I shall give you." Next morning, the mourners arrive anew, but the smell is so nauseating that Tommen gets sick. Jaime takes him outside to console him, advising him to go away inside, something Tommen understands from when Joffrey would torment him. Cersei then joins them, as does Mace Tyrell, and Jaime asks the Lord of Highgarden to have dinner with his sister. When Mace departs, Jaime tells Cersei to get the wedding over with, and then send Lord Mace to besiege Storm's End once again. Cersei likes the idea, hoping Tyrell might lose his life this time. Chapter 9. Brienne reaches Duskendale. She finds the gates barred for the night. The area surrounding it is littered with corpses of both Northmen and men from the Reach. The gates open at morning, and the captain tells Brienne that his sister can paint over the black bat of Lothston on her shield. After finding and telling the sister what sigil she wants, Brienne heads to the Dunfort to speak to the Lord. Since Lord Riker is in the field, she meets with a Castellan, Sir Rufus Leake, and a maester who tells her that many came before her, asking if Dontos Hollard and Sansa Stark had come to Duskendale. The Dunfort's maester tells the story of the defiance of Duskendale, which seems to have been the incident that finally sent King Aerys over the edge, either of his own initiative or from the urgings of his wife Sorella. Denys Darklan took Aerys hostage. When Tywin Lannister, who was Hand, surrounded the Dunfort, Lord Darklan threatened to kill Aerys. When Aerys was captured, Simon Hollard killed one of his Kingsguard, Sir Gywin Gaunt. After Barristan the Bold slipped into the Dunfort and rescued the king, Aerys had nearly every member of the Darklan and Hollard families killed or attained. Dontos, who was young at the time, survived because Barristan asked Aerys to stay his hand. The Castellan tells Brienne that Duskendale would have been the last place Dontos would have fled to. Despairing that she will never find Sansa, Brienne bumps into a skinny boy whom she also saw back at Rosby on a piebald Rosny, but he runs away. Visiting the Seven Swords Inn for dinner, Brienne meets a pious dwarf who tells her that he overheard a man called Nimble Dick in Maidenpool bragging that he had fooled a fool, seeking passage for 3 across the narrow sea. That night, Brienne dreams of Renly's death, but when he topples after the shadow killed him, the body is that of Jaime. The next day, Brienne picks up her shield, painted with the sigil that Tansel had painted for Sir Duncan the Tall. Proceeding past fishing villages on the way to Maidenpool, Brienne camps by the ruins of the Hollard Castle and hears a rider. Fearing it may be Sir Shadrick and that a battle might ensue, she discovers the boy who seems to be stalking her. It turns out to be Podrick Payne, who asks to stay with her, hoping if she finds Sansa, it may lead the boy back to Tyrion. Chapter 10. Marillion is singing day and night. Because his cell is open, his songs can be heard throughout the castle. Although Marillion has a beautiful voice, Sansa does not like the sound of his singing. She asks Peter if he cannot silence the singer. Littlefinger explains to Sansa that they need Marillion. With some persuasion, Marillion has confessed to the murder of Lysa. In return for his confession, Littlefinger has spared his life and his voice. Peter tells Sansa she has to corroborate Marillion's confession. Sansa knows that Marillion did not murder Lysa and therefore hesitates. She has no pity for the singer as he has tried to rape her, but she is afraid that people will see through her lies. The next day, Nestor Royce and his son arrive at the Eyrie to investigate the murder of Lysa Arryn. Although she is afraid, Sansa tells the Royces that Marillion killed Lysa Arryn. Her fright and tears only make her more convincing. Then Marillion is let in. He confesses that he killed his mistress because he could not bear the thought of seeing her married to Peter. The Royces never liked Marillion and seem not to question his confession. They agree that Marillion will be confined to the sky cells. Eventually he will fall or jump to his death. Nestor then informs Peter that his cousin is gathering other lords to have Peter removed as Lord Protector of the Vale. Littlefinger already knows this and is unconcerned. As a reward for his services, he presents Nestor with a grant that makes him and his descendants hereditary lords of the Gates of the Moon. The Gates of the Moon are a secondary castle that has always been in the possession of the main Aryan line. Nestor has been appointed Castellan, but now acquires the castle in his own right. According to Peter, Lysa had decided to give the castle to Nestor, but was murdered before she could sign the order. When Nestor Royce and his son leave, Littlefinger explains to Sansa that Nestor will now be on his side. If Peter is removed as Lord Protector, the grant for the castle will be challenged because it was signed by Peter and not by Robert. That night, when Sansa goes to sleep, Robert creeps into her bed as he has been doing since his mother died. He asks Sansa if she is his mother now. Sansa says yes because she knows this lie will soothe him. Chapter 11. Asha is at 10 Towers waiting for her supporters to arrive. The feast is almost over. There are many Harlaws in the hall, but not enough of the other houses. Asha knows she lacks support. She tells Three Tooth to find food for her crew and her prisoners. Then she goes to her uncle Roderick Harlaw, Lord of Harlaw. She finds him in the book tower reading. Roderick's love for his books has earned him the nickname The Reader. In Asha's name, Roderick has sent summons to the captains to gather at 10 Towers. The captain of Harlaw have come, but few others. Roderick informs Asha that Aeron Greyjoy has called for a king's moot, an assembly of all captains to choose the king. Roderick assures Asha that her cause is hopeless, since no woman has ever ruled the Ironborn. Even Roderick's support does not mean his vassals will support her. Their fealty is for war purposes only. In a king's moot, they are allowed to vote as they please. Roderick counsels Asha to stay away from the king's moot on Oldwick. Besides her lack of support, he is afraid that Euron Greyjoy will kill his competitors. Roderick offers to give her 10 Towers instead. His heir, Harris Harlaw, does not need 10 Towers and will protect her. Asha declines the offer and walks back to the hall. She encounters Christopher Botley on the way. When they were young, Triss was in love with Asha. She liked him in the beginning, but became bored with him and was glad when he was sent away. Christopher, though, has never forgotten her and wants to wed Asha. He is the legitimate lord of House Botley, since Sorwin Botley, his father, has been killed by Euron for refuting his claim to the throne. His titles have been given to Christopher's uncle, who supported Euron. Asha sharply refuses Christopher's advances by reminding him that they are not children anymore and that she is his queen, not his wife. Chapter 12. Cersei is regretting her concession to the Queen of Thorns to allow Tommen and Margaery to sleep in the same bed on their wedding night only. When Jaime arrives to speak to her, he asks if she still means to burn down the Tower of the Hand after the wedding, but she is determined to see it destroyed, and hopefully smoke out a few rats in the process. We begin to notice changes in Cersei, including weight gain and overindulgence in alcohol. Tommen's wedding is a modest affair compared to his brother's, and the ceremony goes over well enough. Afterwards, Kevan comes over to Cersei and mentions that Sandor Clegane is reported to have joined Beric Dondarrion's outlaws. The Queen is already aware of this, having heard that outlaws have pillaged salt pans and savagely raped townswomen. The reports mentioned that they were led by a huge man in a hound's head helmet. Cersei suggests that Lance will hunt down the hound, but her uncle scoffs that his son is not the man to deal with Clegane. When she then suggests that he go after Clegane himself, Sir Kevan responds curtly, "When a dog goes bad, the fault lies with its master." Talking to Jaime, she wonders if Margaery is really a maiden, and he tells her that Mace Tyrell will be marching on Storm's End in a few days, while Garland Tyrell will take half the Tyrell host to Brightwater Keep, and then on to Highgarden, including Lady Allery Tyrell and Lady Olenna. During the reception, Cersei recalls her visit to a woods witch when she was younger, and the old hag's words, "Queen you shall be, until there comes another, younger and more beautiful, to cast you down and take all you hold dear. Drinking heavily during the feast, she begins to wonder if Marjorie is the one in the hag's prophecy, which also mentions the Balanclois. When Tommen chokes on his wine accidentally, Cersei flees the hall for some air. She is met outside by Lady Tanya, who informs her that one of Cersei's maids is a spy reporting to Marjorie's cousins. Cersei assumes it is Senelle and promises to reward Lady Merryweather if this is true, asking why the beauty from Maya would reveal this to her. Tanya responds that she wants what is best for her husband and son, and Cersei could provide advancement for her family. Back inside, Cersei refuses to dance with anyone, but takes note of the attractive bastard of Driftmark, Orain Waters, with silvery hair, a mark of House Valerian which is descended from the freehold of Valyria, like the Targaryens. He almost resembles Prince Rhaegar. Toward the end of the night, Cersei leads everyone outside to watch as the pyromancers set the Tower of the Hand on fire. As the green flames of wildfire consume the tower, the Queen Regent compares the beauty of the spectacle to Joffrey. As the others begin to depart for bed, Cersei remains behind to watch the fires burn, arm in arm with Sir Osmond Kettleblack. Chapter 13. Slipping through the shadow city of Sunspear during the night for a rendezvous with Princess Arianna, Sir Aerys Oakheart considers how unlikely it is for an Oakheart to even be in Dorne. Hailing from the Reach, the Oakhearts have long been enemies of Dorne. The Kingsguard Knight left Marsilia playing Cyvasse with Prince Trystane, and under the protection of the prince's sworn shield, Sir Gascoigne. Aerys recalls his recent meeting with Prince Doran, who advised him that Marcilla would be safer at the Water Gardens. All her guards and Sir Aerys would accompany them there, but Doran asked him not to write to King's Landing about the move. When he arrives to meet Arianna, he swears he'll do no more than tell her it has to end, but her nakedness overwhelms him. After their passion is stated, Aerys is once again consumed by guilt, but Arianna has a response for every one of his doubts. The knight feels he has dishonored himself enough already. Arianna reminds him that he told her he loved her. Aerys responds that he swore a vow. However, Arianna brings up several Kingsguard who broke their vows, most famously Lucamore, the Lutzi, and Terrence Toyne, and even Prince Aemon the Dragon Knight, though Sir Aerys doesn't believe the latter story. She finishes with, "It is not our love that dishonored you. It is the monsters you have served and the brutes you've called your brothers." When Aerys tells her that King Robert was no monster, he can't help but think that she is right about Joffrey. Although he considers Tommen to be Joffrey's opposite, he can't disagree with Arianna's persuasive words that Marcilla would be a better ruler. They talk about Christian Cole, the Kingmaker, Lord Commander of Viserys' First Kingsguard. At the time of Viserys' death, Sir Cole convinced Varys' son, Aegon II, to claim the throne. This led to the war between Aegon and his elder sister Rhaenyra, whom Viserys had long groomed as his successor. Arianna reminds Aerys that in Dorne, the eldest child rules, and had it not been for Christian Cole, Targaryen inheritance might have been rewritten. She then explains to him the real reason that Marcella is being moved to the Water Gardens, to keep her away from those who seek to crown her. Aerys tells her that the Water Gardens are not a prison, but she warns him that Hotar will see that Marcilla does not leave, claiming he is terrible when aroused. Still unable to convince Aerys that her suggestions are correct, Arianna hugs him and begins to tremble. Once again, she manipulates him by asserting that if the Sand Snakes can be imprisoned for wanting to crown Marcilla, she could too. She mentions that there are no secrets between Tyene and herself, and then she tells him her father has never considered her worthy. Prince Doran tried several times to marry her off to old men of high birth, and when she was 14, she discovered a letter her father had written to her brother Quentyn, a ward of Lord Anders Yorenwood for years. In the letter, Doran wrote, "One day you will sit where I sit and rule all of Dorne, and a ruler must be strong of mind and body." So Aerys argues that this couldn't be true, but when she asks him where Prince Quentyn is now, and his response is with Lord Anders Ironwood in the Boneway, Arianna tells him that is what her father wants everyone to believe. She has gotten word from some of her friends that Quentyn is across the Narrow Sea, and she is sure that he is hiring the Golden Company, who recently broke their contract with Mia, The Golden Company has never broken their word since Bitter Steel reformed them nearly 100 years ago, and since most of their members are exiles, the only reason they would change allegiance would be to return home to Westeros. And Anders Ironwood's ancestors fought in 3 of the Blackfire rebellions, a fact that convinces Arianna that he seeks to crown Quentyn as the next Prince of Dawn. Arianna's final persuasive words are, "So your 2 princesses share a common cause, sir. And they share as well a knight who claims to love them both, but will not fight for them." So Aerys then swears to defend Marsilia's right to rule, and to protect Arianna from anyone seeking to steal her birthright. When he asks her what she would have of him, Arianna purrs, all my love, my sweet love, and forever. But first, Marsilia." Chapter 14, Drawing Near Maidenpool. Pod Payne can't seem to remember if Brienne is a knight or a lady, frequently calling her "my lady," "sir." Brienne has taken up his training, abandoned since Aron Santagar was killed by the mob in King's Landing. They soon come up upon a farmer, his wife, and their cart of eggs bound for Maidenpool. As they ride together, the farmer tells Brienne that the town has been mostly rebuilt, thanks to the hard hand of Randyll Tarly. The Maid of Tarth hopes she can slip through town without encountering the Lord of Hornhill, as she owes him a debt but bears no liking for him. At Maidenpool's gates, the captain informs the farmer that he will take his eggs and wife, forcing Brienne to draw her sword. Outnumbered by the gate guards, she is spared fighting by the appearance of Hyle Hunt, a knight highly placed in Lord Tarly's army, and a man whom Brienne despises. Hunt begins to mock her, and Brienne warns him that she will sort him out in a melee someday, just as she did Red Ronnet Connington during the melee at Ashford. She asks him the location of the Stinking Goose, but Sir Hyle takes her to see Lord Randyll first. The commander of Mace Tyrell's vanguard is dispensing his harsh brand of justice when they come upon him. When she is brought before him, Lord Tarly asks her if she killed Renly, and then states he should ship her back to Tarth. But Brienne reveals the king's document that Jaime has given her, and she informs Tarly that she is seeking Sansa. He responds that Sansa is not in Maidenpool, nor would she be in the Vale, as Brienne has also assumed, since Lysa Arryn is dead. Brienne is shocked to learn that Sansa's aunt is dead. She heads off to the tavern, sending Sir Hyle off when he attempts to apologise for his actions at Highgarden. Later, awaiting the arrival of Nimble Dick at the Stinking Goose, she recalls the hurtful game Hyle and his friends played at her expense. Brienne had gone to Highgarden to answer Renly Baratheon's call to banners, expecting to be ridiculed. But unbelievably, many of the young knights she met, Big Ben Bushy, Edmund Ambrose, Red Ronnet Cunnington, Hugh Beesbury, Richard Farrow, Owen Itchfield, Mark Mullendore, and Hyle Hunt, were exceedingly kind to her, going above and beyond the others to win her favour. Wary of their intentions, Brienne was still vulnerable, thanks to hope, but she soon learned the truth. Randyll Tarly called her before him to reveal what he had learned of their game through his son Dickon. The knights involved had a burgeoning wager on who could claim her maidenhead. Tarly ended their game, but told her that the fault lay with herself, claiming her being here encouraged them, and that a war host is no place for a maiden. When Dick Crabb finally arrives, Brienne offers to buy him drinks. Nimble Dick soon launches into his story, egged on by a steady bribe from Brienne. He explains how he offered to help a fool make it across the narrow sea. The fool claimed he had 2 girls with him, but couldn't chance the ports in Maidenpool. So Dick took his coin and took him and the girls along the shore to an old, now unused smuggler's cove. Up past Cracklaw Point, Nimble Dick agrees to take her there for a large sum of coin, pointing out that he is from the area and warns Brienne of the Whispers, a keep built by a mythical ancestor of his, Sir Clarence Crabb. Chapter 15. Sam is trying his best to keep both Gilly and himself calm. During the tumultuous sea trip to Braavos, the Night's Watch ship Blackbird will take them only so far as Braavos, and then Sam will need to find tender there, bound for Old Town. Sam is hopeful that the others making the journey with him will find happiness when they reach their destination. Gilly and the babe at Hornhill, Maester Aemon back at the Citadel, and Darien in his new role as a recruiter. The old maester tells them the story of his sea trip to the Wall, how he travelled with Lord Commander Sir Duncan the Tall as his honour guard, along with Brendan Rivers, Lord Bloodraven himself, who was sent by Egg to serve out the remainder of his life in the Watch. As the trip progresses, Sam finds that nothing he says can console Gilly, and that Maester Aemon's health deteriorates. Damon has nothing but scorn for the wildling girl, but Aemon tells Sam to look closely at the baby to find the source of Gilly's grief. When Sam realizes that the baby is actually Darla and Mance Raider's, not her own, he can't believe what John did. Maester Aemon states, "What threats the Lord Commander made, what promises I can only guess." And while Sam understands that John did so to save the baby from Melisandre's fires, he remains shocked at what cost this will have for Gilly. Anyway, we'll probably stop there.
Hi there, and welcome to part 2 of A Feast for Crows Explained. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, please click the link above. Now, picking up from where we left off last time. Chapter 16. An honour procession flanks Lord Tywin's casket as it heads west, led by many of the Lannister bannermen. Jaime Lannister falls in with his uncle Kevin, and they discuss the raid on Salt Pans. Jaime cautions his uncle not to try and take on Sandor Clegane or Beric Dondarrion, and that he would have made a good hand. Kevin rejects him coolly, and lets Jaime know he knows about the relationship of the twins, Jaime and Cersei. As Jaime returns to King's Landing, he looks upon the encamped Lannister army, which will soon board the Red Wind fleet to lay siege to Dragonstone. He finds his sister in her solar as Grand Maester Pycelle delivers news that Sir Bronn has named Lolly's bastard newborn Tyrion. Jaime realizes that his sister may have Bronn killed for this jape, and he recalls the look on her face the night of Tommen's wedding, when the Tower of the Hand was aflame. This called to mind the madness of King Aerys and the way he would become aroused by fire. Jaime recalls Aerys' rape of his wife the evening he had Lord Chester burnt alive. Jaime had the guard of the Queen's bedchamber when she was screaming for her husband to stop. When Jaime said that they were sworn to protect her too, his partner that night, Sir Jonathan Darry, replied, "We are, but not from him." Jaime asks to speak with Cersei alone, and asks her why she keeps Lady Tanya around all the time, knowing that she is a spy for Margaery. Cersei responds that Tanya is more her spy, considering that the Queen Regent can do more for the Merryweather family. Jaime cautions that she doesn't truly know the woman, but Cersei remarks that she may make Tanya's husband the Hand. After Jaime asks her about the rumour that she plans to name Aurene Waters her new Master of Ships, he recommends that she would be better off naming Paxter Redwyn, but Cersei will not put any Tyrell vassals on her small council. Cersei also defends her choice of Qyburn, a disgraced and twisted maester, to join the council. Cersei's growing paranoia and brutality are becoming more evident, and Jaime retorts, "You are seeing dwarfs in every shadow and making foes of friends. Uncle Kevin is not your enemy. I am not your enemy." However, Cersei throws him out of her solar in fury. In the White Sword Tower, Jaime speaks with Sir Loras Tyrell, asking him what he knows of certain famous Kingsguard. Loras is well versed, but when Jaime mentions some lesser known Kingsguard, the Knight of Flowers does not recognize their names. Jaime points out that all of them served well, perhaps even better than the famous knights. Loras remarks that the great Kingsguard knights will always be remembered as heroes. But Jaime reminds him that the most infamous will also be remembered, and then there are those who are not easily classified, of which he offers an example, Criston Cole, the Kingmaker. Chapter 17. After yet another group presents her with a dwarf's head that is not Tyrion's, Cersei walks together with Qyburn to meet the small council. The new Master of Whisperers indicates that he has prepared the skull in an ebony box for delivery to Prince Doran, but no mention is made that it belongs to Gregor Clegane. Pycelle is near apoplectic upon hearing that Qyburn has been raised to Lord and has replaced Varys on the council, and Cersei makes it clear how unfit she considers the old Grand Maester. Cersei has finalized her appointments, placing men she considers to be meek and loyal and giving them the titles used in the free cities, thinking that she will have no masters with her in the small council. She now has a small council consisting of Orton Merryweather as Judicator, Master of Laws, Aurene Waters as Grand Admiral, Master of Ships, her Uncle Kevin's father-in-law, Sir Harris Swift, as her hand. This last appointment she considers as a shield against any threat that Sir Kevin may present. The council first discusses the unrest in Sunspear and Prince Doran's letter that he imprisoned the Sand Snakes. Cersei notes that they are sending Balon Swan to Dorne with Cregor's head, as has been promised, but she does not mention that Balon will have another task as well. We also learn that Tyrion's High Septon has died in his sleep, and the council brings up the continuing influx of sparrows into King's Landing, stirring up the populace with their preaching of doom and demon worship. But Cersei cares not, nor does she care who becomes High Septon. The next topic is a letter by the Lords Declarant in the Vale of Arryn, but the Queen Regent decides not to intervene directly on Littlefinger's behalf, but only send a letter warning these lords that no harm must come to Lord Peter. When the subject of rebuilding the fleet comes up, Cersei is adamant against making any pact with the Ironborn, stating, "Their turn will come once we have dealt with Stannis." Orain Waters will get his fleet of Drummonds, however, and Cersei will find the coin by deferring the crown's debt to the Faith of the Seven, and to the Iron Bank of Braavos, until the end of the war. Pycelle warns her against this route, cautioning that it would be foolish to make an enemy of the Iron Bank, but the decision is made regardless. The council also discusses the prudence of making someone pay for the Red Wedding so as to appease all the sparrows, and in the meantime offering whomever succeeds the sure-to-die soon Lord Walder Frey a chance to rid himself of unwanted brothers, half-brothers, and nephews. On the topic of the North, the council indicates that Stannis may soon be confronted by Roose Bolton's army, once his bastard son attacks Moat Caitlin from the north, allowing the Lord of the Dreadford passage through the neck. Cersei mentions that Waymond Manderly has taken Davos Seaworth captive after the latter was sent by Stannis to treat with him. Lord Manderly seeks the favour of the Iron Throne, and the Queen will recommend that he can achieve that favour if he beheads Stannis' hand. When Sansa is mentioned, Cersei shocks the council into silence with a violent tirade about how she plans to deal with the girl once she is found. In the awkward silence that follows, Cersei also remarks that Lord Bolton possesses Arya Stark, and that her marriage to his bastard should appease the North, keeping to herself the fact that Arya Stark is really a steward's whelp, provided by Littlefinger. Next, they debate the fact that the Night's Watch might be joining its might to Stannis, especially now that Jon Snow is their Lord Commander. The council decides to warn the Watch that the Crown will stop sending men to the Wall, but Qyburn suggests that they do send 100 men. Cersei picks up on Qyburn's reason for suggesting ostensibly an act of goodwill, and interrupts to indicate that the men sent will really be assassins ordered to remove Ned Stark's bastard. Back in her apartments, Cersei learns from Tanya that Dorcas fancies Osney Kettleblack, and also hints that she herself likes dangerous, scarred men. Cersei tries to learn the name of Tanya's old flame, but the Myrish woman is evasive. When Osney arrives, Cersei butters him up with an offer to join the Kingsguard and a chance to bed her again, provided he accomplishes a couple of tasks. First, Cersei wants him to seduce and hopefully bed Queen Margaery. This will enable Cersei to execute her lawfully. Second, she plans to send him to the Wall as punishment for his treason with Margaery, but in reality, he'll lead a group of men to assassinate Jon Snow. She assures him that the men would not be required to serve in the Watch after they complete their task, and promises him a lordship should he accomplish both missions. Later that night, Cersei asks Lord Tanya to remark to Margaery that she has a secret admirer, but not to let out Sir Osney's name unless the girl probes. Chapter 18. Victorian has left the defence of Moat Caitlin to Ralph Kenning and sailed the Iron Fleet to Oldwick for the Kingsmoot. When the fleet arrives at Naga's Cradle, Victarion has them blockade Euron's silence. The first to greet him on the shore is Aeron, and later that night the priest is at his side for the feast. Several captains pledge their voice to Victorian's claim, but Baelor Blacktide seeks a king who will end the wars, saying, "Balon was mad, Aerion is madder, and Euron is maddest of them all." Soon, the captain finds his niece, advising her not to lay forth a claim, because a woman has no place ruling the Ironborn. Asha stands by her claim and notes that the Damphia may have underestimated the appeal of the Kingsmoot, since the drum will present his claim and there is talk of Mairon Voldmark being presented as heir of the throne by Tarrell, the thrice drowned. While it is apparent that Aeron's intent was to legitimize Victarion as Balon's successor, their chant is interrupted by the arrival of Euron. Victarion notes Euron does not seem to have aged in almost 3 years, that he has been gone. Aerion confronts Euron with the accusation that no godless man may sit the sea stone chair, but Euron cows his brother into leaving the hole. Asha then accuses her uncle of the death of her father, but Euron denies he had anything to do with it. When a fight nearly breaks out between Asha and one of Euron's men, Victarion steps in and demands that Euron leave. After his departure, Victarion and his niece walk outside, and Asha asks why Euron was banished by her father, for he refused to ever speak of it. Victarion eventually tells her that Euron impregnated Victarion's wife. Victarion wanted to kill his brother, but Balon forbid it and sent Euron to exile. Later, Victarion killed his wife with his own hands. Asha offers to set aside her claim if Victarion will name her his Hand of the King and end the war. She feels that the Ironborn have overextended themselves and tells her uncle that she has reached an agreement with Lady Sibel Glover and that their people may keep Sea Dragon Point and the Stony Shore in return for the release of Deepwood Motte, Torrens Square, and Moat Cailin. Victarion is not receptive. Asha replies that she then will claim the throne. Chapter 19. Aeron is wading in the ocean, berating himself for running from Euron. He considers Naga's bones, where the Grey King ruled for 1,000 years and warred against the Storm God. At dawn, Aeron has his drowned men sound the drums and war horns to announce the onset of the Kingsmoot on Oldwick. The prophet wishes for Victarion to win the claim, and hopes Euron will make a mistake and declare early. The first claimant is Galbert Farwind, who rules a small barrier island far to the west of the Iron Islands, where skin changers are said to live. Aeron sees madness in the Lord's eyes. He offers to lead the Iron Men to a bountiful land beyond the Sunset Sea. Few of the gathered captains shout his name. Next up is Eric Ironmaker, who once might have made a great king, but age and his immense weight make him an easy target for Asha to dismiss by asking him to stand up from his chair. The following claimant is another famous Ironborn, Lord Dunstan Drum, who asks the gathering, "Where is it written that our king must be a kraken?" But the Drum's downfall is the cheap loot he offers to swing the vote of the captains. Victarion steps forth next and asks for Aerion's blessing. His speech is short and concise, and he offers to continue the rule his brother Balon set. His offerings are generous, and many captains give him their voice, but it is Asha who interrupts the shouts of "Victarion!" and declares that her claim is best, as she is Balon's daughter. She tells the Ironborn that war is bleeding their people, and to continue it would be folly. She offers peace with the Northmen, and prosperous land on the western shores of the north. When she opens her chests to show the scant spoils of her warring in the north, the dolment of support she receives is staggering. Fearing that a woman will win the Kingsmoot, Aeron is shocked back to reality by the harrowing bellowing of a horn. All eyes turn to a giant war horn bound with ancient Valyrian glyphs being sounded by one of Euron's mongrels. After sounding the horn several times, the giant mute nearly falls over, his lips bloody and blistering. Euron steps forward and announces that he has sailed further and braved more than any other Iron Man. He offers not only peace and land, but all of Westeros to the Ironborn. When Asha asks him how he means to do so, her uncle responds that he will use dragons to conquer the Seven Kingdoms, as Aegon the Conqueror did, using the dragon horn he found amongst the ashes of old Valyria. When he tells the crowd that the horn can bind dragons to his will, and that he knows where 3 dragons can be found, he receives the overwhelming cheers of "Euron, Crow's Eyes, Euron, King!" Chapter 20. On the way to the cove where Nimble Dick led the fool and his 2 companions, Pod catches Dick looking through Brienne's saddlebags. She knew something like this might happen, and warned Pod to keep an eye on him, but having no recourse but to follow Dick, Brienne and Pod continue on their path to Cracklaw Point. Dick tells them some of the history of the region, to pass the monotony of their journey. Brienne's mistrust of Dick has made him take notice, and she considers how easy it is for her to suspect others after the mistreatments she has suffered in her life. She remembers getting her revenge on several of her false suitors during the melee at Bitterbridge, but this has done little to stay her natural distrust. As they pass the Dire Den, Lord Brune's castle, Pod takes note of a rider a couple miles behind them. When Brienne learns that Dick may have known Lord Brune, she considers the possibility that Dick is a deserter from the war. After passing through many a treacherous bog and forest, they finally arrive at the ruins of the Whispers. Brienne commands Pod to watch their horses as she and Dick investigate the ruins. When they find a recently put out cook fire, Brienne realizes their quarrel is still around. The trap is soon sprung, and the fool turns out to be Shagwell of the Bloody. Murmurs. Shagwell kills Nimble Dick with his brutal Morningstar, then informs Brienne that Uswick rode south to Old Town with some of the Murmurs, while Rorge headed for Saltpans. He also reveals a rumour that the daughter of Lord Stark has last been seen with Sandor Clegane. When Shagwell's two companions attack, Brienne's strength and size are too much for Pike and Timon, who fall quickly to her strokes with Oathkeeper. Squaring off against Shagwell, the fool is struck in the head by a stone thrown by Podrick. Brienne forces the fool to dig a grave for Dick, but upon completion of it, the former brave companion attacks her. She quickly dispatches him as well. After killing him, she leaves 2 gold dragons on Dick's grave, and is then surprised to hear a laugh from the ruined wall. It is Sir Hyle Hunt, the rider who Pod had spied, sent by Randall Tarley to stay at Brienne's side in the off chance that she finds Sansa. Chapter 21. At a hidden well at Shandystone in the Desert of Dawn, Arianne and her most trusted companions are awaiting the arrival of Marcilla and her sworn sword. Although Arianne has the utmost trust in Garin, Dre, and Sylvia, she is still unsure about Gerald Dane, the Darkstar. She considers his cruel nature and the mystery surrounding him. She is worried that Aerys may be wary of him, but if this would happen, and they were to come to blows, who would win? Garin warns Arianne that he does not like the man, but she reminds him that they may need his sword and eventually his castle. Later, Darkstar tells her that this scheme to crown Marcilla will not work as she has planned. He then unsheaths his sword and reveals that you incite a war with steel, meaning they should kill Marcilla. When Aerys and Princess Marcilla arrive, Arianne introduces the girl to her companions. Marcilla recalls the Great Knight, Arthur Dane, when she meets Darkstar, which seems to upset the Knight of High Hermitage, because in his mind, people always remember his cousin for his famous sword. Aerys draws Arianne off alone and reveals that Tywin Lannister is dead. They set off at night for the Greenblood, where they will take an orphan's barge west along the river. Marcilla is confused, having been told nothing by Aerys, especially the fact that everyone keeps calling her Your Grace. Arianne tells her some of their plan, that they intend to crown her queen, because her brother Tommen was being controlled by evil counselors. During the trip, Marcilla asks Garin why they call him an orphan of the Greenblood, when he has a mother and father. He explains that it is a metaphor for their mourning the loss of their homeland, and the mother, river, the Rhoyne. They built barges along the Greenblood and hammered them together, as they did in their ancestral land, for they were never comfortable in the Dornish deserts. As Arianne is considering her plan to crown Marcilla at Hellholt, where Illyria Sand's father, Harmon Ulla, rules, they reach the river and spot the barge that Garin's people promised would be waiting. But as they get closer, Arya Hotar steps from the cabin with a dozen crossbowmen. Arianne yells for them to flee, while Dre recommends they yield. But Aerys Oakheart charges the boat, intent on protecting his 2 princesses at all costs. Hit with several bolts, he reaches the deck, but falls to Captain Hotar's long axe. As Arianne falls off her horse screaming, "No!" she hears Marcilla shrieking, and Hotar commanding horsemen to chase after Darkstar, who fled. Arianne notices Marcilla on her hands and knees, her head in her hands and blood streaming down her ears. Then she is brought before Hotar, pleading to know how her father discovered what she planned. The captain of the guard responds, "Someone told. Someone always tells." Chapter 22. Every day, the kindly man asks Arya who she is. When she replies, "No one," he tells her that she lies, trying to get her to forget her true self and give up her past. But Arya resists. She works hard in the temple, cleaning and doing other chores. She witnesses many people entering the temple, some to light candles, others to curl up near a statue to die, and others to speak in private to the kindly man. When asked whose name she whispers at night, she finally admits that there are people she wants to kill, but the priests tell her that it is the many-faced god who determines who shall die, not her. He also finally convinces her to dispose of her possessions, and she does so with all but Needle, which she hides outside the temple under a stone. Once she has done this, the kindly man comes to her and tells her some of their history. The Faceless Men are older than Braavos, having started amongst the slaves working the mines beneath the volcanoes of the Valerian Freehold. The slaves worked hard under the harshest of conditions, and since they came from many different nations, they all prayed to different gods. But one amongst them, although he may have actually been a noble's son or an overseer, no one knows, realized that they were actually all praying to one god, one who could set them free from their torture. The kindly man does not finish the story, but now Arya is a novice at the temple, and she and the waif begin to teach each other their respective languages. As Arya learns Braavosi, the waif also teaches her how to read a lie on someone's face, and Arya discovers that the girl is actually well over 30 years old, having taken poisons as part of her sacrifice to become faceless. One day, when other priests of the many-faced god visit the temple, Arya asks the kindly man how to change her face, as Jaqen H'ghar did. While the priest knows not the name, he tells her. It takes years of prayer, sacrifice, and study to accomplish what he could do. Still, Arya wishes to learn, so he tells her to begin training the muscles of her face in front of a mirror every day. The next day, the kindly man tells Arya that she must leave the temple for a while, so as to learn the Braavosi tongue by being amongst them all the time. He instructs her to find a fishmonger named Brusco, but to not reveal who she really is. Arya decides to use the name Cat, pretending to be an orphan girl from King's Landing. Chapter 23. Sansa is now completely in the role of Elaine Stone, and she has considerable influence in the Eyrie. On the balcony of her room in the Maiden's Tower, she surveys the armies of the Lords Declarant camped outside the Gates of the Moon. Lord Gilwood Hunter arrived first, and immediately blockaded supplies from reaching the Eyrie. Though they are not yet under siege, the situation looks dire from her standpoint. Lord Robert, even more irritable than normal because there are no eggs or bacon, tells Elaine that he still hears Marillion singing every night. Elaine assures him that the bard is dead, although she has not seen the body, but she herself no longer hears singing. When Littlefinger arrives, he informs them that the Lords Declarant are on their way up to the Eyrie for a parley. He tells Elaine that there will be 8 of them, but he is only concerned about Lord Corbray. We learn that Lynn fought against Jon Arryn at Gulltown at the onset of Robert's rebellion, but later fought alongside him at the Trident, where he slew Prince Lewin, Martell of the King's Guard, and broke the Dornish line. While his elder brother supports Peter's position as Lord Protector of the Vale, Sir Lynn has taken up with the Lords Declarant, bearing the Valyrian steel Lady Fallen. Sir Lynn is dangerous and unpredictable, and quick to demand a duel. The Lords Declarant seeks to defend Lord Robert and the Vale, but do not acknowledge Peter as the Lord Protector, naming him a false counsellor who has been misruling the Vale. After Robert has another fit, Littlefinger suggests that Maester Coleman try giving him sweet sleep, although the Maester seems reluctant to do so. Elaine tells her father that Jon Royce will recognize her, having met her at Winterfell when Waymar Royce took the Black, but Peter explains that men see what they expect to see. She also asks him why he doesn't leave the Vale to take up his position of Lord of Harrenhal. Littlefinger is convinced the place is cursed, especially after what happened to Tywin Lannister, Cregor Clegane, and Vargo Hoat. Lady Shella Wint recently died without any heirs, claiming yet another family that once ruled at Black Harren's Nightmare Castle. When Elaine recommends that he give Harrenhal to Lord Walder Frey, Peter smiles and tells her he might, but he would really like to give it to Cersei, although he might have to remove her from the game sooner than planned, unless she removes herself first. Elaine leads the Lords Declarant up to Peter's Solar, where he confounds them by saying, "My lords, I am with you, heart and hand. Show me where to sign, I beg you." But Jon Royce tells him they did not come to attain his signature, but remove him from the Eyrie. Then Peter counters by offering to foster the sons of other lords and asks Lady Waynwood to send Harold Harding to the Eyrie as his ward. But the lords scoff at this request. Littlefinger refuses their demand that he leave the Vale and turn over Robert, and after he calls their bluffs of violence, Lynn Corbury draws Lady Fawnlawn, but this enrages the other Lords Declarant, and Bronze Jon tells the knight to remove his steel, reminding him they are guests. Corbray stalks off, but this has worked to Littlefinger's advantage, as he now turns hostile towards the Lords, demanding that they lift their encampment and give him 1 year to set the Vale to right, or else he will definitely step down as Lord Protector. All the Lords except Jon Royce agree, and Peter emerges victorious in the parley. Later that night, after the Lords have departed, Elaine asks Peter what he plans for the next year. Littlefinger continues his tutelage of Elaine in playing the Game of Thrones. He states that 1 or 2 of the older lords may die over the course of the year, and Lord Gilwood Hunter may well be killed by his younger brother, Harlan, who arranged old Eon's death. Peter admits that he will never be able to sway Bronze Jon, but when Elaine inquires about Sir Lyn, he tells her, "Sir Lyn will remain my implacable enemy. He will speak of me with scorn and loathing to every man he meets, and lends his sword to every secret plot to bring me down." That was when her suspicion turned to certainty. "And how shall you reward him for this service?" Littlefinger laughed aloud. "With gold and boys and promises, of course." Chapter 24. Cersei continues to obliviously move from one folly to the next, and is angered by Tommen's request to sit the Iron Throne and attend small council meetings. She realizes that Margaery put him up to this. Cersei refuses to give her power up to anyone, at least until Tommen comes of age. Next, she sends away the Iron Bank's envoy, Noho Domitius, after telling him there'll be no payment until the rebellion is ended. She receives word from Pycelle that Lord Manderley had Sir Davos beheaded, and the phrase confirmed this. Later, she speaks with Osmond Kettleblack about his younger brother's failed efforts to bed Margaery. Osmond swears that the young queen likes him, but that they are never alone. The Kingsguard names some of those always around her, including the male singers she prefers to entertain her and her companions. When Cersei crosses the yard and finds Tommen riding at the Quinton, she is infuriated. Once again, this was Margaery's idea, and while all those gathered are cheering the young king's jousting ability, Cersei blunders by saying, "One day you shall rule the lists, as your father did." Margaery astutely catches this and asks what tourneys King Robert had won. The Queen Regent evades this by mentioning Robert's deeds at the Trident. She then berates Loras for teaching Tommen how to ride, but the Kingsguard reminds her that there has been no Master-at-Arms at the Red Keep since Aeron Santagar was killed. Walking back to her Solar, she considers sending for another Dornish Master-at-Arms, just to irk the Tyrells. In her Solar, Qyburn informs her that Prince Doran has imprisoned Daemon Sand for demanding the release of the Sand Snakes, and that Sylvia Santagar has been hastily married to the elderly Eldon Estimant. He also tells her that both Daemon Sand and Sylvia are close friends of Doran's daughter, Arianna. Cersei could not care less, but she is interested to hear of a treasonous puppet show. She commands Qyburn to have the 4 puppeteers put to death, but Qyburn wants the woman for his experiments. Cersei has already given him Senel, but he tells her she didn't last. The Queen Regent recalls her screaming in the darkness when she was down in the black cells, but grants Qyburn his test subjects. Later, she is bathing in preparation for dinner. Jaime arrives with Tommen, who is demanding to see her. The Boy King wants his horse tomorrow so that Loras can continue training him, but his mother will have none of it. Jaime mocks her for suggesting that Sir Osmond is thrice the knight Sir Loras is, but Cersei finally convinces her son to wait for a new Master-at-Arms to be named. As she gets dressed, Cersei recalls her fit of rage when her washerwoman shrunk several of her gowns. But it is obvious she is unaware that she is actually gaining weight from all the alcohol.
Her guests for dinner are Felice Stokeworth and her husband Bauman Britch. It is revealed that Tanda Stokeworth has been thrown from her horse and fractured her hip. But Cersei thinks to herself that Tanda will not recover from the wound at her age. Felice says she was refused hospitality by the ward of the Lord Gilus Rosby, and that she encountered ruffians on the road. Cersei deftly convinces Felice and Bauman that she fears Bronn is either hiding Tyrion or gathering swords for him, and may mean to try and kill Tommen. They assure her that it was solely Bronn's responsibility for naming Lolly's bastard son Tyrion, but Bowman gets the hint that Cersei would like to see the ex-sellsword killed, and tells her not to worry any further. On her way to bed, Cersei peeks in on Tommen and sees 3 kittens in bed with him. Meryn Trant informs her that Margaery gave them to him. That night, Cersei thinks of Prince Rhaegar Targaryen and how King Aerys blocked their betrothal out of spite. When she was 10, her father and her aunt Jenna promised she would be betrothed to Rhaegar after the tourney for King Aerys II in Lannisport. She was so happy that she agreed to visit the witch Maggie the Frog with her friends. They laughed at her prophecies, but that night King Aerys mocked Lord Tywin for thinking he would give his son's hand to his servant Tywin's daughter. And after that, Maggie's predictions started to come true, one after another. Chapter 25. Returning to Maidenpool, Hyle Hunt informs Randall Tarly that Brienne has killed 3 of the Bloody Murmurs. Tarly again warns her against playing a knight, but Brienne will not give up her mission. She and Podrick meet up with Sir Hyle the next morning, and he tells them of his plan for finding Sandor Clegane. He reveals that the Hound has not joined Beric Dondarrion, and that the Lightning Lord's band had no part in the raid on Saltpans. Lord Tarly has created this rumour in hopes of turning the small folk against Lord Beric. Sir Hyle knows a Septon with great knowledge of the Riverlands, and proposes that they accompany the man to Saltpans. When Brienne says she has no intention of travelling with Hunt, he tells her that he is no longer in Lord Tarly's service. They soon depart for Saltpans. While Septon Merrybold talks of the gods, his past, and the great bands of wolves in the Riverlands, led by a demon of a she-wolf, Merrybold tells them that they may encounter broken men traumatized by their experiences in war on their way to Quiet Isle. And Brienne summarizes that the Septon himself once had such an experience before he discovered his piety. Chapter 26. Staying at an inn in Braavos, Sam is nearing wit's end. Darien has abandoned them for the brothels. Gilly remains inconsolable, and Maester Aemon's health deteriorates daily. To make matters worse, Sam had spent nearly all their coin on their rooms, a healer for Aemon, and passage on a boat, Lady Ashanora, that they wound up unable to board due to the Maester's health. Feverish and dying, the Maester begs Sam to return to the docks to learn more about this rumour of dragons that Darien had heard at some wine sink. Aemon mumbles to Sam, "Dragons, the grief and glory of my house. My brothers dreamed of dragons too, and the dreams killed them, every one. Sam, we tremble on the cusp of half-remembered prophecies. I should have seen it. Fire consumes, but cold preserves. The wall." Sam departs that night to find Darien, but gets accosted by 2 Bravosi because he is wearing a sword. However, he is saved by Cat of the Canals, who tells him of another black brother about to wed the sailor's wife. Sam finds Darien at the Happy Port, but his brother from the Watch wants nothing more to do with the Black, or Gilly and Aemon for that matter. Sam punches him in the face, but gets tossed into the canal by the proprietors of the brothel. He is saved from drowning by Zondo, a huge summer islander who is a mate aboard the Cinnamon Wind and knows of these dragons that Sam had mentioned. Chapter 27. Aware that Cersei is trying to rid herself of him, Jaime argues that his place is beside the king, not off laying siege to Riverrun, but his sister responds that she can't rely on Daevon despite naming him warden, and needs Jaime to defeat Brendan Tully, as well as find out why Gregor's men at Harrenhal have not released Wireless Manderley, as the crown requested. She states that Osmond Kettleblack will command the Kingsguard in his absence. Although Jaime dislikes the idea, Jaime's command consists of Kenos, Dermot, Strongboar, Red Ronnet, as well as Ilan Payne and Adam Marbrand, whom Jaime demanded as concessions from his sister. On the first night, they guest at Castle Hayford, and Jaime considers the fate of his cousin Tyrek, who would be lord of the castle were he not missing. He thinks it possible the boy is still alive, perhaps having been secreted off by command of Varys, who very well could have known that the riot would occur. Starting that night, Sir Jaime begins training every night with Ilan Payne, in the hopes that he can become a proficient swordsman with his left hand. The company also visits So's Horn and meets with Sir Roger Hogg, arriving at Harrenhal. Jaime has Clegane's men release all prisoners, including Wireless Manderley, and then leaves Sir Bonifer Hasty and the Holy Hundred to hold the castle, until Peter Baelish takes up its lordship. Jaime commands Bonifer to kill Sandor Clegane or Thoros of Myr if either are captured, but requests he send him any Bloody Murmurs or Beric Dondarrion should they fall into his hands. Outside, Jaime comes across Ronnet Cunnington, who mentions how he was once betrothed to Brienne. When Ronnet mocks Brienne, Jaime hits him in the face with his golden hand and insists he calls her by name. Chapter 28. Cersei and Tanya share the Queen's litter en route to the Great Sept of Baelor. The lady from Myr is telling Cersei about all the men who are always around Margaery, and how she was present for the bedding at Renly's wedding. Although Tanya is not sure if Margaery is still a maiden, she affirms that Renly was aroused. She also lets on that, besides all the knights and bards, Pycelle is a frequent visitor of the young queen, and her brother Loras visits perhaps more than any other. They also discuss the new High Septon, a man who was once a sparrow and not a member of the Most Devout. This is not only surprising, but also a concern to Cersei, and considers that she may have to poison this new leader of the Seven if he becomes unruly. Reaching the top of Visenia's hill, the Queen's litter can continue no further as the streets are packed with sparrows. Continuing on foot, Cersei considers Pycelle's objection to her choice of Osfrid Kettleblack to replace Adam Marband as the commander of the City Watch. She takes note of all the bones and skulls piled up around the statue of Baelor and is told that they are the remains of Septons and Septors who were killed by the war because they received no protection from the throne. At the doors to the Great Sept, armed men block the Kingsguard's entry since they bear weapons. Cersei must enter alone, and as she does, she wonders about the anointed knights answering the call to defend the faith. Inside the Sept, she is appalled to find Septon Reynard in Rothsman robes scrubbing the floors, and learns that Septon Torbet has been imprisoned for being obese when so many are starving. She berates the new High Septon, this sparrow wearing frayed robes and standing before her barefoot. He tells her that the faith has sold the crown her father gave his predecessor, as well as all the valuables in their vaults, in order to help feed the poor. Cersei recalls Qyburn's report that the sparrows broke down the doors of the Sept before the final vote with axes in their hands and their leader on their shoulders. She now understands how this man was elected High Septon. Speaking in private, the priest reprimands her for beheading Ned Stark on the steps of the Great Sept, and reveals that he hasn't come to the Red Keep to bless King Tommen because he is still praying for guidance from the Seven to affirm that the boy is the rightful king. Cersei begins to seethe with anger, but concedes to his concerns that the holy men and women on the roads need protection from rape and murder. Cersei agrees to have Tommen rearm the faith, something King Maegor forbade almost 300 years ago. She promises to restore the faith militant, for which the High Septon will acknowledge Tommen as king and forgive the crown's debt to the faith. Back in her litter, Cersei tells Tanya of her triumph. With one stroke, she has gotten the faith to bless Tommen, reduced the throne's debt by almost 1 million dragons, and cleared the city of sparrows by restoring the warriors' sons and the poor fellows. Yet, she doesn't realize the repercussions of what she has set in motion. On the way back to the Red Keep, Cersei's litter encounters Margaery's entourage returning from a horse ride and picnic. Margaery tells Cersei that she should share some of the burden of ruling the realm, but Cersei laughs at her, especially when the young queen tells her she is always well protected by her brother Loras when she goes riding. Chapter 29. Victorian Greyjoy's Iron Victory has rammed one of the longships of the Shield Island. Victorian kills Sir Talbot Surrey of South Shield. Although the Raver's Hand is wounded during the battle, the Ironborn's massive fleet is soon victorious in taking the shields, which sit at the mouth of the Mandor north of the city of Oldtown. It is Victorian's command that won the battle. but it will be King Euron they cheer for, engineering their bold attack. Back in his cabin, as the dusky woman Euron gave him tends his wounds, Victorian recalls Aeron's words that he would find a way to remove Euron from the sea stone chair. He remembers how he helped capture Lord Baelor Blacktide, who had refused to acknowledge Euron after the King's Moot on Oldwick, and paid for it with his life. Arsha, however, had escaped the Iron Islands along with those loyal to her, landing at Lord Hewitt's town on Oakenshield. The Lord Captain meets the Reader and the Drum. Both are worried that Euron's little conquest will bring ruin down upon them, as surely Highgarden will respond. At the feast, Victorian notes that Euron has shamed Lord Humphrey Hewitt and his wife and daughters. King Euron then raises Harris Harley, Andric the Unsmiling, Marin Volmark, and Newt the Barber to Lords of the Four Shields, effectively stealing away the lieutenants of his adversaries. Euron declares that they will sail the next day with provisions plundered from the Shield Islands, selling the slaves that they had just taken in the Free Cities on their way to find the dragons he had promised. But Roderick and many of the captains object, stating that they should attack Old Town or the Arbor, and Euron stalks from the hall. Soon, one of Euron's bastard sons tells the Iron Captain that the king wishes to see him. In his room, Euron tells his brother that the Reader was correct, that the whole fleet could never reach Slaver's Bay together. He believes that the Iron Fleet alone could, however, and promises his brother the Sea Stone Chair as reward if he sails to Slaver's Bay and returns with Daenerys. Euron means to marry her and ascend to the Iron Throne, with Lord Blacktide's words that Euron was maddest of them all on his mind. Victorian agrees to go, thinking to himself, "You stole my wife and despoiled her, so I'll have yours." Chapter 30. Jaime's small host reaches Castle Darry, and he finds himself contemplating the genius of his Uncle Kevin for his choice of a bride for Lancel, Amaray Frey, whose mother is a Darry. He has dispatched Red Ronnet to accompany Wireless Manderley to Maidenpool, but nevertheless, he has too many men to be fed at his cousin's new castle. Jaime takes note of all the armed Freys and Sparrows in the castle, far outnumbering Lannister men. Darry's maester greets Sir Jaime, surprised by this unexpected visit, and tells him that Kevin departed right after the wedding, and that Lancel is praying in the sept. The maester provides him with Lancel's own room, since Jaime's cousin has taken to sleeping in the sept. As Jaime bathes before the feast, he notices that Josmyn Peckleton, his new squire, wishes to bed Pyre. Jaime tells him to use Lancel's room for his first bedding, saying, "You'll feel a lord yourself when you're done, if Pyre knows her business." But Jaime warns him to treat her kindly, perhaps due to his own guilt for refusing the girl when Qyburn sent her during his repercussion at Harrenhal. At the feast, Jaime learns that his cousin has been fasting since the old High Septon died. Lancel also does not join them for dinner. Lady Amaray begs Jaime to stay and help them defeat Lord Beric Dondarrion, the Hound, and the other outlaws. He learns that the outlaws seem to be following a woman now, cloaked and hooded, and no one has seen Beric Dondarrion for a while. Jaime's companion, Strongbore, claims to be moved by Amy's words, and promises to return after they take Riverrun to sort out the Hound. But Jaime suspects the Hound will kill him. Jaime leaves the table and goes to the sept. 3 armed sparrows bar his path, but Lancel lets him in. Lancel admits that his father left after they quarrelled, and that he does not intend to consummate his marriage. And then he admits his greatest sins, serving the wine that resulted in King Robert's death, and that he had been sleeping with Cersei, thus proving that Tyrion was not lying about Cersei's infidelity. Lancel states that he plans to forsake his title as Lord of Darry and head to King's Landing to swear vows as a warrior's son. Later, in the yard, Jaime admits to Sir Ilyn that he slept with Cersei when she was at Castle Darry with Robert. Cersei wanted him to get to Arya Stark, and he would have killed her had he found her first. Sir Ilyn Payne laughs at Jaime.
Now, picking up from where we left off last time, Chapter 31. Upon reaching the Quiet Isle, Brienne and her companions are taken up the path to see the elder brother. Brienne mentions to the brother guiding them that she is heading for Salt Pans to kill the Hound. This takes the man aback, but he tells them to speak to their elder. They see a huge horse in their stables, obviously a war horse, who has mauled 2 of the brothers, Stranger. On a hill, they pass a huge cloaked novice digging graves.
The man appears lame, but they cannot see his face. The elder brother speaks further of the horrible raid on salt pans, made worse by the fact that Sir Quincy Cox hid behind his castle walls and did nothing to help the villagers. After dinner, the elder brother speaks in private with Brienne. He asks what she seeks in salt pans, and when she mentions a high-born girl, the elder lets on that it is the wrong Stark she seeks. For the hound captured Arya. Shocked that both of Lady Catelyn's daughters may yet be alive, she is equally surprised when he informs her that Sandor Clegane is dead. The elder brother has buried his corpse himself and left the hound's head helm on the grave. It was some other outlaw who found and wore it when they raided salt pans. He goes on to tell her that he took pity on Sandor before he died, and will only say that he is at rest when she asks if he is truly dead. The elder brother then tells her that he was once a knight who fought for Prince Rhaegar at the Trident. He took several terrible wounds in the battle and fell into the river, yet awoke upon the shores of the Quiet Isle. He urges her not to be another casualty of this war and return home. Brienne breaks down and cries, telling him her story, finishing with, "I have to try to save her, or die in the attempt." Chapter 32. Margaery is fuming at Cersei and her council that the throne must respond at once to the Ironmen's attack on the Shield Islands. Cersei does not appreciate her tone, and claims that it must fall to Highgarden to retake these rocks. Loras Tyrell interjects as his sister seethes, stating that his brothers Willis and Garland have the men but not the ships to win back the islands. He requests that Cersei pull Lord Redwine's fleet from their siege of Dragonstone, so they may return to gather troops at the Arbor. The Queen Regent denies his request, implying that the Redwine fleet would not depart until Dragonstone fell, knowing that Lord Paxter intended to starve them out. Sir Loras asks leave to lead the assault, and promises Cersei Dragonstone within a fortnight. Pleased by this unexpected gift, Cersei grants him permission. Returning to her apartments, Pycelle objects to her sending Loras, but Cersei is hoping the knight will die besieging the walls of Dragonstone. But if not, she would still strike a blow against Stannis. When she meets Qyburn, he mentions that he has a champion to replace Loras should he fall. Cersei is not so sure of Qyburn's paragon, and informs him that the smiths she's hired believe the weight of the armor he requested cannot be borne by a human. Later, in bed, Lady Tanya asks her certain questions. Cersei becomes concerned the woman may report her answers to Margaery, but Tanya assures her that all her secrets are safe. However, their chat is interrupted by a guard pounding on her door with word that Felice Stokeworth begged to see her. Cersei finds the woman battered and listens to the tale of her husband's death after Bronn defeated him in single combat. But before killing him, Bronn forced Sir Bowman to confess who put him up to this. Bronn then told Felice to leave immediately or meet the same fate. When Felice told her mother's guards to arrest Bronn, they laughed and told her to listen to Lord Stokeworth. Fearful that Felice would spread rumours of Cersei's involvement, Cersei summons Lord Qyburn so that he could take another female subject to his lab in the Black Cells. Back in her room, a very inebriated Cersei contemplates how to deal with Bronn, and then begins to fondle Tanya the way Robert would do to her when he was drunk. Chapter 33. Reaching the camps besieging Riverrun, Jaime meets with his cousin Sir Davin. The new Warder of the West spits when he hears it was Vargo Hoat who had Jaime's hand amputated. Davin reveals how much the Freys are vexing him, and even their own uncle Aemon Frey is trying his patience, complaining that he doesn't want his new seat destroyed by a siege. Worst of all is Sir Ryman, who keeps tying a noose around Edmure Tully's neck each morning, threatening the Blackfish that he means to hang him unless Riverrun surrenders. However, the Blackfish has long exposed Ryman's threat to be empty. They speak of Lancel and his abandonment of Darry, which reminds Jaime of the looks on Amy Frey's family's faces when Lancel made his intentions clear. He is all too aware of how Lord Walder deals with those who break Frey marriage proposals. Davin tells the Lord Commander that their uncle Kevin passed through the camps heading west. He also mentions that Edmure's wife, Roslyn, is pregnant, and oddly, she is fond of the disposed Lord of Riverrun. He also tells Jaime of Lord Gawain Westerling, constantly hounding him to rescue his wife and children, who are being held captive by Brendan Tully. Jaime is perturbed to learn how little help they are receiving from the bannermen of the Tullys who bent the knee to the Iron Throne after the Red Wedding. He realizes that he must secure Riverrun quickly to put down any threat of rebellion. Starving them out would take far too long. The next morning, Jaime is considering a parley with Sir Brendan and recalls when he was a squire of Summer Craighole, sent to Riverrun with a message. Lord Hoster seated Jaime next to Lysa, but the young man was far more interested in Lysa's famous uncle, the Blackfish. Within sight of the walls of Riverrun, Jaime has his tent pitched and soon receives a visit from his aunt Jenna and her husband, Aemon Frey. Jenna is still a Lannister through and through, with the wit and sharp tongue also shared by all of Lord Tywin's children. Jaime lies to them that their son Cleos died bravely, and then listens to Aemon's complaints about a siege before enlightening Aemon to the fact that he was named Lord of Riverrun. But Peter Baelish is the Lord Paramount of the Trident. Aemon is outraged to learn he is a vassal of Peter, but Jaime is unconcerned, as there is nothing he can do about it, and Cersei won't indulge someone like Aemon Frey. Jenna tells Aemon to leave so she can speak in private with her nephew. Lady Jenna makes it known how she feels about Cersei rearming the Faith, namely that the decision is idiotic, given the trouble the Faith militant caused the Targaryens before they were finally put down and disbanded. Cersei's choice of counsellors, in particular rejecting her brother Kevan as hand, and Lancel's foolish decision to leave behind his lordship. When Jaime remarks that he plans to treat with Sir Brendan, his aunt tells him that he would be better off beheading Edmure, but Jaime feels this may further the Blackfish's resolve, and would sooner assault the walls of Riverrun if a parley will not work. At last, they discuss Lord Tywin, and Jaime asks her if she loved her eldest brother. Lady Jenna tells him how it was Tywin, a boy of only 10, who objected to their Lord Father's decision to wed the 7-year-old Jenna to Aemon Frey, who was not even the heir to the twins. For that alone, she loved him, stating, "Every little girl needs a big brother to protect her. Who will protect us now?" When Jaime insists that he is his father's son, his aunt replies, "You smile like Geryon and fight like Tig. And there's some of Kevan in you, else you would not wear that cloak. But Tyrion is Tywin's son, not you." Chapter 34. Acclimated to the routine of the Cat of the Canals, Arya is learning the Braavosi tongue and trying to learn 3 new things every time she is sent out from the House of the Black and White, as the kindly man told her she must. Selling clams by day, she sleeps in a bed with Brusco's daughters by night, and for 3 days during each black moon, she returns to the House of Black and White. She delivers all 3 things the kindly man wants her to learn, but he still sends her back to Brusco. He tells her of the many-faced god, especially how all religions are aware of him, even if they do not worship him. Even within the 7, there exists the stranger, whom the kindly man calls him of many faces. One night, when the black moon begins, she meets Darion after he departs the Happy Port. Arya is angered by the singer's abandoning his vows as a black brother. Returning to Brusco's, she gives him the coin she has collected from selling his mollusks and a pair of new boots, then heads to the House of Black and White for 3 nights. The waif teaches her how to identify certain poisons like sweet sleep and the tears of Lys, and then tells her the full story of how she came to the temple. She claims to be the eldest child from an ancient house, but when her stepmother had a true daughter, the woman tried to poison the waif. When her father discovered this, he delivered 2/3 of his wealth to the House of Black and White, and soon after, his new wife was dead, and the waif now a servant in the temple. She reveals that she lied about the part of that tale, but before Arya can guess which part, the kindly man visits her. She tells him the 3 new things she has learned, finishing with the knowledge that Darion is dead. His throat was slit and his body dumped in the canal. When the kindly man asks who killed him, she replies, "Arya of House Stark." The priest again asks her who she is, to which she answers, "No one." But, as always, he tells her she lies, then asks the waif to bring Arya some warm milk to help her sleep. Arya goes to bed, but upon wakening in the morning, she discovers that she is blind. Chapter 35. the Cinnamon Wind is somewhere off the coast of Dawn, as Sam leads a prayer service to mourn the passing of Aemon Targaryen. Zondo's information on the 3 dragons had given Maester Aemon second wind, but it was not enough. Sam recalls some of the ancient Maester's words during the sea voyage from Braavos. "No one ever looked for a girl. It was a prince that was promised." Rhaegar, I thought. The error crept in from the translation. Dragons are neither male nor female. Daenerys is the one, born amidst salt and smoke. Lady Melisandre has misread the signs. Stannis has some of the dragon blood in him, yes. Rhael, Egg's little girl, she was how they, the Baratheons, came by it. They must send her a maester. Daenerys must be counselled, taught, protected. Aemon begged Sam to convince the Archmaesters of this, and later rambled some of the following, perhaps prophetic, lines. A glass candle that could not be lit. Eggs that would not hatch. The Sphinx was the riddle, not the riddler. Gilly and Sam sit together after the eulogy, drinking rum. Gilly points out that had Aemon remained on the wall, Melisandre might have sacrificed him for his king's blood. Jon must have known this and sent the old maester, as well as Dala's boy, to save them from the Red Woman's fires. Gilly then says that she will name the boy Aemon Steelsong once he reaches the age of 2. Below decks, Sam and Gilly have sex, although he is consumed by guilt for breaking his vows. Afterwards, Sam tries to avoid Gilly, but Koja corners him and tells him that what he and Gilly did was considered holy in the Summer Islands, a way of honouring the dead by celebrating life. Koja advises Sam that Gilly knows they can never be a man and wife. But there was nothing wrong with them comforting each other on the long journey. Sam is persuaded, but perhaps it is because Koja threatens to throw him overboard if he does not continue sleeping with Gilly. Chapter 36. Lord Aurene Waters has returned from Dragonstone with news that the fortress has fallen. This was good news indeed, considering that word from the Reach mentioned the Ironmen raiding the Arbor and pushing towards Old Town. Aurene indicates that Sir Loras was previously wounded during the assault, and lays dying after having boiling oil poured on him from the walls. He also holds Loras responsible for turning the battle into a massacre, as thousands of the crowned soldiers died in the storming of Dragonstone's keep, many of them knights or lords. Ecstatic, Cersei delivers the news personally to Margaery. The young queen is appalled by Cersei's description of the fate of her brother, and commands Cersei to get out of her quarters. Back in her solar, 4 separate men bring word on a dwarf sighting, and one brings her a head. However, none of them bear word related to Tyrion, and Cersei sends them away in frustration. Later, in court, Cersei must deal with several unimportant pleas. Then Septon Reynard arrives. Furious that the High Septon himself did not come before her, she scoffs at his words that the Faith is trying to abolish the brothels in the city. Pycelle brings word that Lord Giles may not live much longer, but Cersei demands that the Grand Maester do his utmost to keep the old man alive. At dinner with her son, Tommen mentions that Margaery has been urging him to attend court, to which Cersei responds how much she'd like to see the young queen's tongue torn out. Tommen yells at his mother, and as punishment for his outburst, she commands Sir Boris to oversee the lashing of the boy king's whipping boy by Tommen himself, rather than by a knight. During the night, Cersei dreams of her visit to the witch back when she was 10 years old. She vividly recalls Maggie the Frog's plea they leave her, but Cersei and Melara will not back down. Maggie commands them to cut open their thumbs, and the old Easterner tastes their blood. She prophesied that Cersei would marry the king, not the prince as Cersei thought, but her husband would father 16 children and Cersei only 3, and that she would reign as queen. Only until there comes another, younger and more beautiful, to cast you down and take all that you hold dear. Gold shall be their crowns and gold their shrouds. And when your tears have drowned you, the Valancourt shall wrap his hands about your pale white throat and choke the life from you. Maggie also warns that Melara will die very soon, and true enough, she drowns in a well shortly after. Waking from the nightmare, she sends for Pycelle to make her a potion that permits sleep without dreams. She asks him if seeing the future is possible, but the Maester evades answering by saying, "Should our morrows be foretold?" And to that I should answer, "No. Some doors are best left closed." Aggravated, she sends for Qyburn, first asking if Felice could still be used to root out Bronn, but the necromancer tells her it is too late for that. Then she inquires of him the same she had asked of Pycelle. We learn that Maggie was from the Far East and had married a wealthy merchant. Their son was upjumped to a petty lord by Cersei's grandfather. Qyburn tells her that the name Maggie was probably a mispronunciation of Magi, and that blood magic was very powerful. The de-chained maester suggests that she already knew how to forestall the prophecy. Seizing upon this suggestion, Cersei plans a foolproof way to have Margaery killed, deciding that treason would work best. The next day, she inquires of Sir Osmond if his brother Osnay could defeat Sir Boros in single combat. He replies that it wouldn't even be a match, and wonders if Boros has committed treason. Cersei replies no, but thinks to herself, but Osney has. Chapter 37. Approaching the inn at the crossroads, Brienne's party encounters many corpses hanging from trees, each with a chunk of rock salt in their mouths. They summarize that these were some of the men responsible for the raid on salt pans, probably hanged by Lord Beric's outlaw band. Reaching the inn, they meet 4 girls on the porch, and the oldest addresses them. She asks for silver for a night's lodging, stating the only visitors they get are either sparrows or robbers, and worse. When Sir Hyle makes an inquiry regarding her tone, the smith approaches, and Brienne is nearly floored by his resemblance to Renly. Inside, Brienne plans to leave before dawn with Podrick only, although she is unsure where to go. At dinner, Septon Merrybold leads a prayer, but Gendry does not participate and returns to his forge. One of the orphan boys tells the Septon that it is because he worships the Lord of Light. Brienne delivers some food to Gendry and mentions his resemblance to King Robert, but they are interrupted by riders, drawing near. Gendry says they are friends, but when Brienne peeks out, she recognizes Baita among the 7 men. The leader, wearing the helm of Sandor Clegane, threatens to kill Willow if she fires her crossbow. Brienne draws Oathkeeper and intercedes. One of the men says that they are wounded and seek only fresh horses, for they are being chased by outlaws. But the large man wearing the hound's helm charges Brienne, remembering her well. She makes short work of him, running him through with Oathkeeper, and whispers, "Sapphires," as Rogue dies. But she is blindsided by Baita, who tackles her to the ground. The huge cannibal smashes her in the face, breaking bones, and then shatters her forearm. She hears the sounds of swords clashing in the background, but then Baita takes a bite out of her face. Her last vision is Baita's tongue sticking out, obscenely long, almost like it were a sword. Chapter 38. Sir Jaime and Sir Brendan face each other across the drawbridge to Riverrun, alone for a parley during the siege of Riverrun. The Blackfish is aware of the oath Jaime swore to Catelyn, but the member of the Kingsguard makes it known that he does not have the Stark girls. He offers Edmure Tully in exchange for Lady Sabelle Spicer and her children, but Brendan refuses, telling him he swore to his king to keep his wife safe and won't hand her over to a Frey noose. Jaime responds that the girl has been pardoned and no harm will come to her, nor anyone else if Brendan yields Riverrun. They will be free to go or take the Black as they choose. But Brendan dismisses the offer, claiming that he and his men would rather die with swords in their hands than be paraded through King's Landing to die like Eddard Stark. Brendan adds that he is well provisioned for a siege, and the Lannisters and Frey casualties will be far higher than his own if they storm Riverrun. The Blackfish also makes it clear that he believes Lord Tywin had a hand in the Red Wedding, though that will never absolve the Freys for their breach of the sacred laws of hospitality. Jaime challenges the older knight to single combat, with each choosing a champion. When Brendan prods Jaime to face him himself, Jaime cannot help but rise to the bait. But the Blackfish is not so foolish as to trust that Jaime's terms would be honoured. The parley over, Jaime rides back to his camp and calls his captains for a war council, resolved that he must break his vow to Lady Catelyn and storm Riverrun. The Riverland lords who have bent the knee to the Iron Throne do not tolerate the Frey's presence at the war council. So Ryman is too drunk to attend, but Edwin and bastard Walder are present. When confronted by Lord Clement Piper as the condition of his son, Sir Mark,
Edwin replies that he is still held at the Twins to ensure that Pink Maiden is truly loyal to the crown. When Bastard Walder and Lord Clement nearly come to blows when Piper challenges Edwin to a duel over a threat to Lord Clement's heir, Jaime silences them, ending the council prematurely. Lord Clement storms out, and Lord Vance explains to Jaime that as well as his firstborn son, several of Lord Clement's cousins and nephews accompanied Marc to the Twins, and are either captives or dead. When Edwin denounces them as traitors and rebels, Jaime coldly retorts that the Freys first rebelled against the crown with Robb Stark and then betrayed him, making them twice the traitors House Piper are. Jaime takes enjoyment out of watching Edwin's smug attitude evaporate at that remark. Summoning Sir Ilan Payne and Sir Lyle Crackle, Jaime heads straight for the Frey camp. He first has Payne cut loose Edmure Tully, and when Edwin and his father, Sir Ryman, come forth to protest, he warns them to keep quiet. When Ryman persists, stating that he is the heir to the crossing, Jaime punches him in the face with his golden hand and dismisses Ryman back to the Twins. Sick of the man's whoring and drinking, and takes the bladed crown that his whore wears. When Jaime places Edwin in charge of the Freys, Jaime witnesses a glimpse of the content Edwin feels for his own father. Jaime also demands that Lord Walder release all the hostages that he has imprisoned at the Twins. Jaime asks that Sir Ryman's singer accompany him back to his pavilion, and has his squires draw a bath for Edmure. Jaime informs Edmure that he can be returned to Riverrun forthwith, and if he yields the castle, all will end well for him. The terms are that the small folk can stay and serve Lord Emmon Frey. Sir Brendan will be permitted to take the Black along with any of the garrison who choose the same, and Edmure and his pregnant wife Roslyn will be well-treated prisoners at Casterly Rock. If their child is a boy, Jaime says he will serve House Lannister as a page and squire, and they will grant the boy some lands when he gets his knighthood. If it is a girl, the Lannisters will make sure she has a good dowry when she is old enough to wed. When Edmure asks what will happen should he refuse to yield, Sir Jaime indicates that he will assault Riverrun's walls in waves. The ex-Tully Bannerman will attack first as fodder, followed by the Freys, and finally his cousins Westerman. After the castle falls, Jaime will see that Riverrun is demolished and put all within its walls to the sword. Jaime also delivers a personal threat. Should Roslyn give birth before the siege is lifted, he will deliver the child to Edmure within the castle by trebuchet. As Jaime leaves the tent, commanding Ryman's singer to play The Rains of Casmere for Edmure, the former Lord of Riverrun pleads, "No, not him. Get him away from me." Chapter 39. With Pycelle prostrate before her, Cersei accuses him of letting Giles Rosby die, because she believes he is now taking orders from Margaery. The Grand Maester denies this, explaining that he visits the young queen to give her sleeping potions, but Cersei knows otherwise. Forcing a confession from him that he also brings Margaery moon tea, she then commands him to announce that Lord Rosby's dying wish was to donate all his lands and incomes to the crown. Lady Tanya wonders how Margaery could be so foolish, but Cersei is too excited to care. She does realize that she will need more proof in order to have Margaery executed for treason, knowing that she must arrange to have the girl caught in the act. She asks Tanya and her husband to bring the Blue Bard to dinner that night. During the meal, Cersei demotes Sir Harry Swift to Lord Treasurer, and with the position of hand now vacant, she offers the title to Lord Orton Merryweather. Lord Orton accepts, although he is notably uncomfortable during the dinner, particularly due to the presence of Margaery's favourite singer. Cersei wastes little time moving on to the Blue Bard, accusing him of sleeping with Queen Margaery. The singer denies it, despite Cersei smashing him in the face with his own lute, and even later in the black cells under interrogation by Qyburn. But the defrocked maester tortures the singer into submission, and they lead him to say what they want. He accuses several others of also having carnal knowledge of Margaery, and then Cersei promises that he'll be allowed to take the black after he confesses it in front of the court. Later, Tanya persuades Cersei to name Alla as innocent, since they may be able to use her to bear witness against Margaery and her other cousins. At breakfast, Tommen mentions that Margaery will be at the Sept for Maiden's Day. Cersei then launches the final move of her scheme, commanding Sir Osney to go before the High Septon and admit his sins of bedding Margaery, Eleanor, and Mega.
The youngest Kettleblack agrees to do so, but states the best lies have some truth in them, to give him flavour. So the Queen Regent then allows him to have his way with her. Chapter 40. Ariana is imprisoned atop the Spear Tower, forced to contemplate her failed scheme. She never expected someone to inform her father of the plan, nor for Hotar to intercept them, and certainly not Gerald Dane's unprovoked attack on Marcella. Dane escaped from Hotar's men, but he left a terrible scar on Marcella's face, barely missing a beheading stroke, as was his intent. Thinking her father would see her within a day, Ariana becomes distraught as days turn into weeks, and although servants come and go with food, none will speak to her. She considers who could have betrayed her, ponders her feeling at the loss of Sir Ares, and thinks of her close relationship with Tyene. She eventually persuades the young serving girl, Cedra, to deliver a letter to Lord Fowler, knowing that the girl has feelings for Garen, who, Ariana assumes, is also being imprisoned along with her other co-conspirators. But the next day, Cedra does not return, and Ariana never sees her again during her imprisonment. After an immediate period of agonized waiting, Erio Hotar arrives to bring her before her father. Prince Doran asks her why, to which Ariana replies, "For the honor of our house." The prince tells her they have not caught Dane, but the damage he did to Marcella, a ward of their house, has done naught but bring the Martells dishonor. He cautions her that a war with the Iron Throne is the last thing they need. Although the young dragon wrote that Dorn was populous, his memoirs were written to portray himself in a better light. Prince Doran admits that Dorn is actually the least populous of the Seven Kingdoms and could not survive open war with the throne. He admits it was a mistake not to have her taken prior to running off with Marcella, but will not reveal who betrayed her. When he tells her that she disappoints him, Ariana retorts, "You have been disappointing me for years, father." Prince Doran discloses that none of her co-conspirators are imprisoned. Instead, he has sent Sir Alden Dort to Norvos to serve Ariana's mother. Garen is in Tyrosh for 2 years, and Sylvia was sent to Greenstone to marry Lord Eldon Estamont. He goes on to remark that Ariana and her cousins may get the war they wanted, as Sir Balon Swan is on his way to Sunspear. The prince has several of his bannermen stalling him, but eventually Sir Balon will discover that his brother in the Kingsguard, Sir Ares, is dead, and Marcilla maimed. Ariana continues to taunt her father, and he cautions her that he is out of patience. But the princess is unimpressed, remarking, "For Lord Tywin, you always had the forbearance of Baelor the Blessed, but not for your own blood. None." He responds, "You mistake patience for forbearance. I have worked at the downfall of Tywin Lannister since the day they told me of Elia and her children." When Ariana tells him that she wants her rights to Dorne, Prince Doran finally reveals that she will have the kingdom when he passes. Ariana divulges that she knew of his scheme to make Quentyn his heir, but her father tells her that he had other plans for her. He offered her hand to old men because he knew she would rebuke them, but he had to be seen as trying. All along, he had promised her to Prince Viserys, but now that the last male Targaryen is dead, he has no reason to deny her right to Dorne. He finishes by saying, "We princes make our careful plans, and the gods smash them all awry." His original plan was to send her to Tyrosh to serve as the Archon's cupbearer, where she could meet her betrothed in secret, while her brother, Quentyn, was being raised to assume the seat of their house. Finally, he reveals why her brother is overseas, to bring back their heart's desire. When Ariana asks what that is, her father replies, "Vengeance, justice, fire, and blood." Chapter 41. Elaine has been trying to coax a petulant Lord Robert to get dressed for the long descent to the Gates of the Moon. With winter fast approaching, the high seat of the Arryns will soon become inhospitable, and the entire staff is retreating for the valley floor. Her father is away at the wedding of Lord Lionel Corbray, who supports the Lord Protector along with several other Vale lords, including, just recently, Lord Bendar Belmore. Maester Coleman is concerned that Robert is being given sweet sleep too often, as it is poisonous over time. However, he sees no other way to get the boy down the mountain without a seizure. After riding the basket down to Skye, Elaine and the rest of the household begin their descent on mules, led by Maya Stone. Accompanying them is Lady Miranda Royce, Lord Nestor's daughter. Randa is a natural gossip, and tells Elaine that Lady Waynwood and Sir Simon Templeton both showed at Lord Corbury's wedding, and that Riverrun has yielded, but not Dragonstone or Storm's End. Elaine is careful with her words around the very clever Randa, although she stumbles when the woman mentions that Lord Eddard's bastard now commands the Night's Watch. She thinks to herself it would be sweet to see her half-brother once more. Randa discloses that Harry the Heir was recently knighted at a tourney, but Miranda doesn't like him because Lady Waynwood denied Lord Nestor's attempt to marry Randa to Harry. She also lets on that he has a bastard daughter despite his young age. Their banter turns to Maya and how her beloved Sir Michael Redfort recently married one of Lord Yon's daughters. Elaine reveals that Sir Lothar Brune likes Maya, but doesn't believe that the bastard daughter of Robert Baratheon is aware. After a rough stretch crossing a gorge, where Elaine has to carry a shaking Robert across, the party reaches the Gates of the Moon. She discovers that her father has returned from the east, and she goes to see him immediately. Lord Peter is entertaining 3 hedge knights he recently hired for his household, one of whom is none other than Sir Shedrick of the Shady Glen. Dismissing them, Peter imparts word of Cersei's spiralling downfall, saying, "It is quite vexing. I had hoped to have 4 or 5 quiet years to plant some seeds and allow some fruits to ripen, but it is a good thing that I thrive on chaos. What little peace and order the 5 kings left us will not long survive the 3 queens, I fear." But he will not explain what he meant by 3 queens. Peter then announces that he has a present for her, a marriage contract to Harry the Heir. He tells her that she first must win his approval before they are even betrothed, hopefully giving them enough time for Tyrion to perish, allowing her to marry again. Lady Waynwood agreed to the proposal because, despite Elaine's low birth, she is nonetheless the daughter of the Lord Protector, not to mention that House Waynwood is heavily in debt, much of it now owed to Littlefinger. When Elaine asks how, the young knight could be Lady Anya's heir when she has 3 sons, as well as daughters and grandsons. He tells her that Harry is actually Lord Robert's heir. He explains that Lord John Arryn's sister married a Waynwood, and her only son perished at age 3. But their youngest daughter married a knight of House Harding, who are landed knights sworn to Iron Oaks, and begot a son, now Sir Harold Harding. Besides Lord Robert, he is the only living male heir to the Arryns, since he is Lord John's great-nephew. When Elaine learns the truth, she utters, "If Robert were to die," to which Lord Peter replies, "When Robert dies, Harry the Heir becomes Lord Harold, Defender of the Vale and Lord of the Eyrie. John Arryn's bannermen will never love me, nor our silly, shaking Robert. But they will love their young falcon. And when they come together for his wedding, and you come out, clad in a maiden's cloak of white and grey with a direwolf embezzled on the back, why, every knight in the Vale will pledge his sword to win you back your birthright. So those are your gifts from me, my sweet Sansa. Harry, the Eyrie, and Winterfell." Chapter 42. Brienne fluctuates between a fever dream and semi-consciousness, as the Outlords transport her severely injured body to Lady Stoneheart. While she is being treated by Jane Heddle, Brienne learns that Biter is dead, skewered through the head by a spear wielded by Gendry. Lem, now wearing the Hound Steel Dog helm, tells her that Stoneheart wants her hanged for her crimes. Brienne fully awakens in a cave, where she meets Thoros of Myr. The Red Priest is a ghost of his former self, and he informs her about the current state of the former Brotherhood without banners. "Lord Beric's fire has gone out of this world. A grimmer shadow leads us in his place. War makes monsters of us all." Before long, Brienne is brought before Lady Stoneheart, where she, as well as Pod and Sir Hyle, will be judged. Brienne cannot see Stoneheart's face, but notices her holding a bronze crown ringed by iron swords. A Northman, most likely Harwin, places Oathkeeper before Stoneheart, along with Brienne's writ signed by King Tommen. The Outlaws see this as infutable proof that the Maid of Tarth is about Lannister business. Her words are wasted here, as her pleas of innocence fall on deaf ears. Finally, Lady Stoneheart speaks, needing to place her hand over her throat in order to gurgle out her judgment. Upon removing her head, Brienne is horrified to discover that the hangwoman is actually Lady Catelyn Stark, albeit now a spectre from the grave. Thoros reveals that it was Lord Beric himself who administered the kiss of life to her, finally extinguishing his own unnatural life. Stoneheart gives Brienne an ultimatum: kill Sir Jaime Lannister or be hanged. When the maid states that she will not make that choice, the thing that had been Catelyn Stark orders them hanged. Despite Sir Hyle's pleas for mercy and Podrick's stoicism, nooses are looped about all three of their necks as they are hefted upward, thrashing and dying. Brienne screams out a word. Chapter 43. Accompanied by 6 newly reinstated warriors' son, Septa Moella, brings word to the court that Queen Margaery and her cousins have been imprisoned at the Great Sept of Baelor for adultery and high treason. The Sept reveals that Margaery's maidenhead is not intact. Grand Maester Pycelle also reluctantly discloses to the Septa that Margaery has had him mix moon tea on many occasions. Leaving the throne room confident that Margaery was finished, Cersei agrees with Orain Water's request to launch his new Dromons, in case Mace Tyrell decides to march on King's Landing to save his daughter. Lord Orton Merryweather remarks that the High Septon may want to try Margaery himself, as the Faith used to do. Cersei hopes he is right. Cersei has Tommen sign some blank warrants, which she then affixes names to. Summoning Sir Osfryd, she orders him to arrest Sir Talad, the Blue Bard, Hugh Clifton, Mark Mullendore, as well as the Redwyne twins, whom she wants to be found innocent of the charges of bedding Margaery. The next morning, Cersei and Tanya are carried by a litter to the Great Sept. On the way, Tanya inquires, "What if Margaery demands that her innocence be determined by battle?" Cersei smiles and replies that she must be championed by a knight of the Kingsguard. But Sir Osmond is brother to one of her accusers. That leaves only Sir Melantriant and Sir Boris Blount. Cersei states that the former will not be feeling well when the time comes. Within the Sept, the High Septon grants Cersei permission to visit her good daughter, while Tanya goes to speak with Margaery's cousins. Margaery is beside herself, stripped of her clothes and dignity, while she is asked once an hour to confess her fornication. Cersei tells her that she has rounded up all those that Sir Osney named, lying that they will reveal her innocence. When Cersei says that a sworn brother of the Kingsguard will fight for her, should it come to trial by combat, Margaery demands that her own brother, Sir Garland, be summoned to fight in place of the grievously injured Sir Loras. Cersei would never allow this to happen, and Margaery, well aware of Cersei's intentions, tells her to leave, calling her a vile, scheming, evil bitch. Cersei is then escorted deep beneath Visenya's hill to speak with the High Septon. He tells her that 7 will sit in judgment of Margaery and her cousins, as the Faith did in yore, before King Jaehaerys I Targaryen stripped them of this power. When Cersei asks to have Sir Osney released into her custody, the priest flatly denies her. Chained to the ceiling of his cell, Osney has been brutally whipped. Infuriated, Cersei tells the High Septon that Osney came of his own free will. The holy man responds, "I have heard many men confess, but seldom have I heard a man so pleased to be so guilty. The more diligently we applied the scourge, the more Sir Osney's offences seemed to change. He would now have us believe that he never touched Margaery Tyrell." When asked now if he had carnal knowledge of the Queen, Osney points at Cersei, saying, "Hey, that one there." Furthermore, he confesses that Cersei ordered him to kill the old High Septon. Upon hearing this, Cersei bolts from the cell, racing headlong through the Great Sept, fearing what may happen should the Faith question Tanya Merryweather. She is soon overtaken by a group of Septors, who strip her and confine her to a grim cell, her screams going unheard. Cersei begins to shiver from the cold. Every time she begins to fall asleep, she is jolted awake and asked if she will confess her sins. After 2 days of this torture, Qyburn enters her cell. She begs him to take her home, but the dechained maester tells her it will not be allowed, and she will be tried for murder, treason, and fornication. He reveals that Margaery will be tried by the same court, and that he delivered the Blue Bard to the High Septon. But despite the Faith's torture, he is still singing the same sweet song we taught him. Qyburn then informs her of the rapid changes made since her fall. The realm is now being governed by Sir Harry Swift and Pycelle. They removed Sir Osfrid as commander of the Gold Cloaks and Qyburn from the Small Council, though he still works for them thanks to his control of Varys' Whisperers. Lord Orton and Tanya have fled to Longtable, while Sir Kevin has been sent for to take over the Regency. Perhaps worst of all, Orain Waters unshipped his oars and sailed the fleet, possibly to join Lord Stannis, while Lord Mace Tyrell and Lord Randall Tarley are marching on King's Landing. Despite Qyburn's words that his unbeatable champion is ready, Cersei knows that only a Kingsguard can defend her in a trial by combat. She has Qyburn pen her final plea to her brother. "Come at once. Help me. Save me. I need you as I have never needed you before. I love you. I love you, love you. Come at once." Chapter 44. Aemon Frey, now Lord of Riverrun in fact as well as name, demands Edmure Tully's head, so Jaime will not accede, though he is sorely tempted since Edmure betrayed his confessions by helping his uncle, Sir Brynden, to escape the castle when he turned it over to the Lannisters. Despite a massive search for Lord Hoster's brother, Jaime knows that the Blackfish will not be found, nor will he abandon the fight. Before being escorted west to Castle Rock as a notable prisoner, Sir Edmure speaks his mind. "You'll never know how sick it makes me to see you in this room, Kingslayer. You'll never know how much I despise you." Jaime replies that he has been despised by better men than him. Later, Lady Sabelle Westerling and her daughter, the widow Jane Stark, are brought before Jaime. Jane is in mourning for her husband and defiant to her mother, but when Sabelle moves to slap her, Jaime intervenes and kindly asks Jane to leave the Solar. Jaime confirms to Lady Sabelle that House Westerling has its pardon. Her brother has been named Lord of Casmere, and marriages will be arranged for her daughters, though Jane will have to wait 2 years before marrying again, to prevent rumours that any children she has are actually Robb Stark's. Lady Sabelle asks Jaime to inquire after her son, Sir Raynaud, who accompanied Robb to the twins, and had no knowledge of the arrangement between his mother and Tywin Lannister. Jaime, suspecting that Raynaud is likely dead, as Walder Frey also didn't know of the arrangement, agrees to inquire, promising that House Lannister will pay his ransom if Raynaud is held captive. She then mentions that Lord Tywin promised a highborn marriage for him, that Raynaud should have joy of him. When Jaime states that Joy is his uncle Gerron's natural daughter, Sabelle shouts, "You want a Westerling to marry a bastard?" Jaime, desiring to strangle the woman with her own necklace, retorts, "No more than I want Joy to marry the son of some scheming turncloak bitch. Your daughter is worth 10 of you, my lady. You'll leave with Edmure and Sir Folly on the morrow. Until then, you would do well to stay out of my sight." He then contemplates how much Lord Gawain knew of his wife's schemes. The following morning, Jaime warns Sir Forley Prester to guard Sir Edmure well, for fear either the Blackfish or Beric Dondarrion might try to free him. The knight is aware of his orders to kill Edmure should he try to slip away. Jaime adds that he should do the same for Jane Stark, stating that she is twice as dangerous as Edmure should she escape. Jaime visits Edwin Frey, who is preparing his army to return to the twins. Edwin divulges that his father, Sir Raymond, along with his entire retinue, were hanged by Lady Stoneheart near Fairmarket. Although Edwin blames Jaime, the Lord Commander is well aware that Edwin couldn't care less that his father is dead, and although Edwin is now heir to the twins, Jaime knows that Blackwater will probably soon move to kill his brother. Jaime's only real concern is that the outlaws must be getting bolder if they are willing to kill Lord Walder's heir only a day's ride from the twins. Jaime takes his leave after inquiring about Sir Raynaud's fate. Apparently, Queen Jane's brother was responsible for losing Greywind on the Freys, and was shot full of quarrels before diving into the river. An offhand comment from Jaime about killing those responsible makes the Frey drop their smug attitude about the act. Content that he has taken Riverrun without having to take up arms against the Tullys or Starks, Jaime later agrees to allow Sir Desmond Grell and Sir Robin Rhaegar to take the Black, commanding Raff the Sweetling to escort them to Maidenpool. During Lord Emmon's speech to the people of Riverrun, Jaime speaks with a singer he took from Raymond Frey earlier, Tom of Seven Streams, and tells Jaime that he hopes to play for Lady Jenna and Lord Emmon over the winter. That night, Jaime dreams of his mother, Lady Joanna, whom he barely remembers. But the dream disturbs him when his mother cries and asks who he really is. In the morning, a nervous Maester Vyman delivers Cersei's message written by Qyburn. The old Maester asks if Jaime wishes to respond, but the King's Guard hands the letter to Peck, saying, "No, put this in the fire." Chapter 45. The Cinnamon Wind passes through the Red Wind Straits on her way to Old Town. Before they reach their destination, they undergo a customs inspection. The Ironborn now control many of the outlying towns and fortifications surrounding the Arbor and along the Mander nearly to Old Town, having sacked Ryamsport and taking Vinetown and Starfish Harbour. They have also been raiding ships in the area. Sam learns that even Old Town is at risk until Lord Paxter Redwine can bring the fleet back from Dragonstone. Meanwhile, Lord Leighton Hightower has not left his tower in years. While his sons struggle to protect the great city, his youngest son, Sir Humphrey, has sailed to the Free Cities to hire sails or persuade his half-sister, Lynesse, to loan him some of the Archon of Lys's ships. As Sam prepares to disembark from the Citadel, he considers whether it will be safe for Gilly at Hornhill, since it will only have a small regiment of guards left. Fortunately, Sam knows that Gilly will be safe aboard the Cinnamon Wind, at least until he can learn more of the situation in Old Town. Upon reaching the Seneschal's court, Sam is forced to wait a long while before he will be admitted to speak with the Seneschal. His patience running thin at the delay, Sam is approached by Alleris, who informs him that it will take a penny to get past the Acolyte. But when Alleris introduces himself, Sam is taken aback when he learns that the boy is called the Sphinx. Samwell then tells Alleris the story of how he reached Old Town, leaving out only the secrets he has sworn to keep. After hearing all that has transpired, especially Maester Aemon's plea that the Citadel learn of Daenerys, Alleris tells him to forget the Seneschal. The Archmaesters will believe little of what Sam has to say, but there is one who will, Archmaester Marwyn. At the Isle of Ravens, Sam recognizes Leo Tyrell, but before words can be said, Marwyn the Mage appears and ushers Sam and Alleris into his chambers. Marwyn first describes how Valyria used dragonglass for various magical means, noticing Sam's interest in the obsidian candle. Sam then repeats what he told Alleris, stating that Maester Aemon was convinced that Daenerys was the promised one in the prophecy, not Prince Rhaegar or Stannis. To this, Archmaester Marwyn reveals how fickle and treacherous prophecy can be, but he is still intrigued. He makes it clear to Sam that Maester Aemon may have been killed by the Archmaesters had he spoken his mind to them. When Sam inquires why, Marwyn replies, "Who do you think killed all the dragons the last time around? The world the Citadel is building has no place in it for sorcery or prophecy or glass candles, much less for dragons. Ask yourself why Aemon Targaryen was allowed to waste his life upon the wall, when by rights he should have been raised to Archmaester. His blood was why. He could not be trusted, no more than I can." Commanding Alleris to look after Sam, Marwyn makes known his plan to travel to Slaver's Bay, as Maester Aemon had intended. He intends to take the Cinnamon Wind, hoping to reach Daenerys prior to the Grey Sheep, as he calls the other Archmaesters. He advises Sam to work rapidly towards his chain, and to never mention anything of prophecies, dragons, or Daenerys to anyone in the Citadel. Marwyn quickly departs, and Alleris reveals to Sam that their meeting was not happenstance. The mage knew Sam was coming, supposedly from the dragon glass candle. The novice in the room the whole time shows Sam to his quarters, finally divulging his name. "I'm Pate, like the pig boy." And that's it for A Feast for Crows. Thank you for watching, and please check out our playlist on every chapter of A Song of Ice and Fire Explained. Also, when you get the chance, try out Fantasy Flights, a Game of Thrones board game, digital edition.